You think your ex was bad? Here's the worst relationship disasters you'll ever hear. Found out the day that we closed on our house that he was cheating. He just ended things out of the blue. He had previously said he wanted to marry me. We started planning a life together. I'd never been happier in my life with someone. In fact, never felt so sure about something. It devastated me. I'd felt in my bones that he was it. I haven't felt that way about anyone since, and it's been 10 years. It took a while to process, if I'm honest, years. I don't miss him or love him anymore, I just wish I could have what he took from me. I completely feel this. It took me years too, like way longer than I'd like to admit to anyone in real life. I eventually just stopped talking about it because I knew they were bored of the subject, and really, what else was there to say? I wouldn't take him back under any circumstances, it's just I miss who I thought I was with him. Someone who had it all figured out and who was with someone who loved me without doubt, who had never hurt me. I miss what we built together over the years. I miss the house, the financial security. I guess most of all, I just miss trusting someone unconditionally, and I know that I'll never have that again. Not really. Herpes scare, where he treated me like I had the plague until my test results came back. Wouldn't even sit near me or touch anything I'd touched or cooked. Then I tested negative twice. He was then tested and was positive and thought nothing of it. Wanted to resume unprotected whoopee, kiss, engage in touching and stuff. In other words, he treated me exactly the opposite of how he did when he thought I might be positive. She left her hard drive plugged into my computer. She'd been insisting that I'd been cheating for months, and I suspected she was projecting, so I took a look. And she was doing it with guys for money in my bed. I had to call her dad to come get her. She wouldn't leave my house. She got mad after I broke up with her just because she caught a transmitted disease and I didn't. So she put stuff in my gas tank. Just a frickin' awful woman all round. I never understood why it seems so common for cheaters to act like you're the one who did them wrong for breaking up with them after you catch them, even to the point where they take revenge like this. I'd never cheat, but if I did and I was caught and broken up with, I'd probably just whimper away with my tail between my legs and not find ways to make the person's life even more miserable. I don't know, maybe the lack of introspection and accountability comes from the same personality traits that make someone a cheater. I'd say it's definitely a recurring theme in our videos that when it comes to cheaters, they repeatedly accuse their partners of cheating. And as for the revenge, I suspect these people just don't have the capacity to imagine they've done anything wrong, which probably explains the cheating too. Well, mine ruined things by dying. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing that he was very unwell. Calling for an ambulance while fruitlessly trying to wake him up. Seeing paramedics start CPR and knowing that life won't be the same. Having to ring his family and explain what had happened. Making the decision to remove life support. It was all unimaginably awful. Left his apartment one morning and never saw him alive again. He had a wreck and he didn't survive. It broke my heart. I've had bad breakups before and since, but nothing like that. It was the finality of losing him that was the worst. I can empathize with you. My ex took substances at a rave. I was only drunk. We went to a city 4 hours away to rave with the crew. He became violent and erratic. It was so bizarre. Anyway, drove him home. The entire time he was saying voices were telling him to hurt me and stuff. The whole way back home. I drove him to his grandpa's house, and then he chased me and announced he was going to hit me. I called his parents and my mum, crying. My mum came and the neighbors called the cops. Like 8 cop cars came, an ambulance, they tackled him and took him to a mental ward. Diagnosed him with type 2 bipolar mood disorder. I was on the phone with the friends I went out with that night, begging them to tell me if he was on substances. They finally cracked and said that he took Molly. I told his parents and the hospital and paramedics. His mega-religious parents blamed me for putting that stuff into their precious little boy. Mind you, he was 25 years old and a 220-pound beast. I was 22 and 120 pounds. I told him what happened because he didn't remember. He wanted to get back together and never corrected his parents, and was excited to invite me to a family wedding as long as I apologized to them for what I did, specifically to his mum. I was so done. I broke up with him on the spot. I know it sounds so evil to admit, but I relished in his ugly crying and whys of confusion. This was 2 years after the event, and dealing with his parents constantly berating me for the whole relationship afterwards, I was just so done with his excuses for his parents saying that I was the devil. My ex put her new relationship status on Facebook, and that's how I found out I was single. I've got a similar but different one. My girlfriend didn't ever change her status from single to in a relationship because she Never goes on there and doesn't even know how, and why does it even matter? And then one day she changed it to in a relationship with someone that wasn't me. And that's how I found out we weren't together anymore. He got arrested for possession of illegal adult films. Then he attempted to self-delete. He's still in a psych hospital. They were much more social and charismatic than me, so when it ended, all of my friends left with her. I was messaging people on Facebook at the time and not getting any response. There was this moment that I said, "Oh, right," and then I lit the whole thing on fire and cut them all out. I've been there. My family left with my ex-husband. Got cheated on. She let me know by sharing videos they made in my apartment on my bed, and the entire time it was them saying how I'm a loser and I won't ever find true love. My wife left me for a good friend of ours. This good friend was very charismatic but also pretty terrible. He bragged about all of his past exploits and felt the most pride when it included breaking up a couple only to dump the girl afterwards. We were both horrified by these stories, and yet somehow it didn't dissuade my wife, and we became the next couple he broke up. That was the worst. I haven't been the same since. Why would you be good friends with someone you knew was pretty terrible? I mean, better to find out sooner than later, but still. Was supposed to fly back from a trip on my birthday. She stayed an extra night, came home, and had cheated on me. We lived together, so I stayed in another bedroom while I could hear her on the phone with the guy who she cheated with, who lived across the country. The calls were frequent and lasted quite a while. I drank myself silly and eventually moved out when an opportunity presented itself. We had been together for like 4 years at the time. My ex knowingly brought bed bugs into my apartment and lied to me about it. He did a ton of other horrible, deliberate crap too, but the bed bugs cost me thousands of dollars and multiple rounds of fumigating, living with my clothes in trash bags, and being mattressless for months. The worst thing for me was realizing that I'd been giving everything, only to find out they weren't even trying. It's painful when you put in so much effort, but the other person is just emotionally checked out. Same here. I would have literally jumped across an ocean for him, but he didn't even try to put his leg across a very, very tiny puddle for me. After the realization set in, I couldn't fathom how much of a fool I was. I'm still trying to mend the damage that put on my self-esteem. Partner's mother passes away from cancer, and they're such a mess that I handle all of the funeral arrangements. She claims emotional meltdown as justification to sleep around with randos and refuses therapy, but then accuses me of stealing her inheritance. Her mum was flat broke, by the way. When I protest, she invites an army deserter addict into our home and throws me out on the street after blowing all of our money on opiates. I had a nervous breakdown after that and was homeless for 18 months afterwards. My husband died of prostate cancer at a young age. It's the absolute worst. I think mine would be the time when my then-wife decided one day to just pack a suitcase and move 12 hours away. At the time, we had a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old. I was left to deal with abandonment issues and heartache that the kids obviously had after that. At least she didn't try to take the kids with her. Partner cheated on me with a really good friend at the time, doubting myself ever since. So I choose to be single now due to the major trust issues. I know not everyone will cheat, but I can't get too close to anyone because of the psychological damage that person's actions left on me. Went to a dispensary and they took only cash. They were about to close and the ATM was down the street. My boyfriend offered the dispensary owner to keep me locked in their establishment as collateral so that he could run down the street to the ATM. He never came back. I smoked a doobie with the owner and called an Uber home. We never spoke again. Well, good riddance, I guess. I'm not sure there's ever been a more clear and distinct demonstration of someone's evaluation of you than them literally deciding you weren't worth the price of self-medicating. At least the owner was chill about it. I was physically attacked, gave me a concussion multiple times, called the cops on me and had me arrested just because I scratched his face while trying to defend myself. Meanwhile, my entire body was covered in bruises. It took me way too long to finally escape his madness due to him constantly threatening me and my family. I filed a restraining order and ran. Now I can smell a red flag from miles away. So thanks for that, I guess. She had a psychotic episode. During it, she left me for her physical therapist and told everybody that I knew that I was a narcissist and that she had found out that I was planning to kill her and her family. All of it was her psychosis. It was very painful for me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Unbeknownst to me, the girl that I was dating had links to organized crime in our city. She used to supplement her income with smack dealing and organizing escorts for guys. We had a big argument over the phone. She got drunk and fell down the stairs in her house. She called up her friends and told them I'd pushed her, so they came over to sort me out. Fortunately or unfortunately, they got the wrong house and attacked my neighbors. Oof. The police were called and multiple arrests were made. The cops later raided my girlfriend's house and large quantities of substances were found, and she ended up doing time. In 2013, she crashed her car while out of her mind on booze and white snow and was pronounced dead at the scene. He left his MySpace open on my laptop and I snooped. He had been selling himself on Craigslist for gay, unprotected whoopee. He was also an insane Third Reich enthusiast and had an entire secret profile dedicated to its leader, and was posting horrible videos depicting deaths of certain minority groups and other hate crimes. I was 16 and he had gotten me pregnant, which I thought was a burst Trojan, but he posted that he had actually poked holes in all of his protection to impregnate me on purpose. Unfortunately, the baby didn't make it very long due to the stress of finding out all of this at once. I immediately dumped him and got myself tested and couldn't frickin' believe it, but I was clean. He got my name tattooed on him after we broke up in an attempt to win me back. When that didn't work, he robbed a Radio Shack that he worked at for money to buy me an engagement ring. He went to jail, and from my latest snooping, he appears to have gotten his crap together. I wish him the best, but my God, what a rough time that was. My husband wanted a Ford Mustang but didn't have good credit, so I had to co-sign for the loan. 4 days later, he asked me for a divorce. Turns out he wanted to drive his 19-year-old girlfriend around in a new Mustang instead of our older Toyota Corolla. Boyfriend called me by my best friend's name while we were doing the deed. My ex said she felt bad for a guy who liked her, but she was dating me. So she went south of the border on him in a stairwell. She told me almost immediately out of guilt, but it's not like telling me undoes that deed. I also had an ex who kept telling me stories about her ex-husband. Like she was pretty sure him and his buddy had killed a guy, but she never knew for sure. And that he was an addict with lots of weapons and some of the worst rage she'd ever seen. About a week or two into us officially dating, she just up and disappeared. She stops texting and won't answer her calls. Turns out her ex-husband needed a ride to get to rehab, and she wanted to help him, but, oh, don't worry, I'm not going to get back together with him. Well, you'll never guess what happened. She got back with him. My ex-husband flew his ex and their child to our home in California to have a hot staycation while I was helping my sister through brain surgery in Ohio. I was with my ex-girlfriend for 3 years in my late 20s. We had just returned from a wonderful week-long vacation, and in hindsight, she hid her feelings extremely well. 2 days later, she broke up with me out of the blue, saying she needed to find herself and her individuality. A few days later, I found out she had been cheating on me with a very close friend of mine. After that, I never spoke to either of them again. My ex used to be in love with this girl he barely knew years before he was with me. He took her rejection hard, but I never knew the full extent of it until years later. A couple of years ago, days before my 30th birthday, he ran into her randomly. He then proceeded to text his friends things about how he's not over her, how good she looked, he's not attracted to me anymore, he feels trapped in the relationship, wants to try things with her again, etc., etc. And he texted her as well. Meanwhile, it was completely one-sided and she hadn't even thought about him in years. Shortly after this happened, I found a letter in our home that he'd written years ago, right after they broke up, that was written to her that he'd never got rid of. It wasn't a nice letter about how much he loved her. No, it was an angry, graphically violent, hate-filled letter about how she's nothing more than a worthless working girl who deserves to die, and all the ways in which he wanted to brutally end her. I couldn't believe this was the person I'd been living with for the last 2 years. He tried to downplay it like it was no big deal and was from a long time ago, and begged me not to tell her or anyone, which I stupidly listened to until about a year later when I saw he was still following her on Instagram after I threatened to tell her if he even so much as looked in her direction again. We met up for coffee and I told her everything, exposing his secret, where she thanked me and proceeded to immediately block him on everything. It was an extremely healing moment for me. I was 18 years old and was not on speaking terms with my family. I moved in with my boyfriend, and a month later there was a knock at my door, and it was a young woman asking for my boyfriend. I made myself scarce and went into the kitchen, trying not to be jealous. She yells, "Do you know I'm pregnant with his baby?" Talk about a punch to the gut. I still went on to marry and have a child with him myself before realizing what an awful situation I'd gotten myself into. Seriously, parents who bail on their kids at 18 suck. Left to my own devices, I had no trusted confidants or friends to give me sound advice. I would not wish circumstances like this on anyone. She cheated, and I fell into a depression. She filed for divorce, claiming that I couldn't be a parent to our children because of said depression. Curiously, in her opinion, I was somehow healthy enough to work a ton of overtime, though. This all means that she cheated, I don't get to see my kids that much, and I give her a lot of money each month as punishment. Oh my god, that is a brutal deal. I hate that a legal system could look at this situation and decide that this was really the best outcome. I don't know if you got the wrong lawyer or something, but even if you weren't doing your best, surely there should be some sort of consideration for the kind of person who would willingly do this to their spouse. Was sitting in our bedroom where our computer desk was, spending part of my Saturday browsing the internet. Heard her come into the apartment with a friend and didn't think anything of it until I heard them start having loud whoopee together. The pervasive betrayal of a lengthy affair with a junkie. All of the lies that go into such treachery are beyond imagination. Violence. He was a very scary person and subjected me to the unspeakable act, belittled me and isolated me from my family and friends. The cherry on top was when I finally had proof he had cheated and broke up with him. He then showed up on my doorstep, refusing to leave, and proceeded to pin me to my bed and headbutt me in the face, breaking my nose. Talk about the most horrific 2 years of my life. Got dumped, went on a bender, and that bender never ended. Fun times. Me begging him to treat me right was apparently the final straw for him. I met my now ex-wife in 2018 and we married in 2022, the high point of a loving, fun, happy relationship. In 2023, she had a burst of success in her career as a stage actor, got a massive ego and decided she could have whoever she wanted. So she started dating a female colleague of ours while we were, by her own admission, still happily married, then fell in love with her and decided she didn't want to be married to a man anymore. I went from happily kissing my wife every morning to realizing I needed to move out within a matter of days. This sucked, of course, but it's not even getting started. Because this all went down while we were rehearsing for a stage show we were starring in opposite each other. By the time the show opened, it was clear our marriage was over. Every night, twice a night on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays, I had to go through a scene where her character aggressively berates me, often with the audience joining in, and then she forgives me and we get married on stage. I did this 22 times while I knew my marriage was over. She was absolutely horrible about feeling out boundaries during this period, and not only did she bring her girlfriend to the show multiple times, they parked at a table right outside the dressing room, so the only way for me to get backstage was to walk by them or go straight through the audience. I was having uncontrollable crying fits and panic attacks between acts. And a couple of people even asked if I was mistreating her or cheating because they couldn't believe someone could be so vindictive. But she wasn't being vindictive. She's just a narcissist, and I was too shocked and traumatized to stick up for myself. On the last night of the show, I was freaking out and wishing I could just pilot my body like a mech suit and just stop feeling anything. And then that actually happened. My body was going to the right places, my voice was singing the right notes, but the world was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. It was honestly awesome. Like my entire nervous system was finally giving me a break from being tortured for 2 weeks. I told my therapist about this, calling it my first flow state as a performer. She identified it as a dissociative episode, a symptom of PTSD. Then it happened a couple more times at different gigs and it was way less awesome. The whole thing was by far the worst experience of my life and it just kept going. For 2.5 weeks. Until the show finally closed and I had to dive full steam into separating my life from the woman I was sure I'd grow old with. I hear she's been leaning hard into cosplaying as a lesbian by getting a hideous buzz cut, which has screwed up her casting prospects. She's also managed to get fired from her job for being a generally awful NPD person. Well, mine staged his death when I tried to leave him. The fool put cameras in my house. Fortunately, he bought them from the Best Buy my friend worked at, and I found out. God bless. My ex invited me to a party. Unbeknownst to me, his new girlfriend was there, and he had told everyone in attendance, including her, that I was his, quote, psycho ex-girlfriend. Needless to say, I was not his ex-anything. I was madly in love, and nobody told me. We were together for 5 years. My heart just shattered on impact. It was a major before and after moment that shaped my life. I'm so much stronger now, but I've lost the ability to love with my whole heart. I rejected doing the deed with her, and she got mad and drove me home. The next day, she posted pics on her Facebook of her in bed with a different guy. Such a shame I just wasn't ready for that yet, as it was going to be my first time. What made a mother-in-law absolutely hate their child's spouse? My daughter-in-law was a cheating addict who strung my son along through a whole pregnancy full of lies. The baby came out a few too many shades off to pass as my son's. She even tried to take my son to court for child support until her lawyer laid eyes on my son and told her to forget it. She stole and pawned a whole lot of my son's belongings along the way too. She never got clean, never got help, and has done this whole thing to yet another man since then. My grandmother hated my mother because my father was married once before and it doesn't count the second time. Basically, she preferred his ex to my mum because divorce. And I'm not making assumptions based on her behavior or things my mother said. She actually said that to me in those exact words many times, as she gave my half-siblings gifts, but not me. Grandpa snuck me gifts behind her back though, because he wasn't an awful person. She was clearly a horrible person, not an average mother-in-law who just dislikes her daughter-in-law. My parents did as much as they could to shelter me from it, but my mum suffered her treatment for 20 years before the universe finally saw fit to take Grandma down. As an adult, after our father died, I had to explain to my oldest half-brother why my father limited contact with his awesome grandma, who was apparently the nicest woman. She brought my half-brother a car. And why it wasn't just my mother being a gargantuan witch who can't get along with anyone. I'm a mother of 3 sons. One of them is married, and until very recently, I absolutely adored my daughter-in-law. She was the daughter I didn't have. They gave me the most amazing granddaughter. My daughter-in-law did, however, bring a level of drama to our lives that we were not accustomed to and that was hard to adjust to. Being a household of primarily males, there wasn't much drama before. The daughter-in-law was 9 years older than my son. They started dating when my son was 19. I was a bit concerned about the age difference, but I always treated her respectfully and with kindness. They're amidst divorce now, and I'm not thrilled with her behavior over the past 6 months. My reason is that she knew she was dating a very young man, and they knew when they decided to marry and have a child that the young man was still quite young. My daughter-in-law remained flummoxed that my son, who is 23 now, hasn't turned into a 30-year-old adult like she is. Some red flags did go off for me as I observed her own relationship with her mother. They were quite harsh with each other, but I tried not to let that affect my acceptance of her, and she became an integral part of our family. Nonetheless, she's treated my son poorly and I no longer like her. It's got absolutely nothing to do with competing with her, it has to do with how she's treating him and us. This potential mother-in-law is open to any potential daughter-in-law or same-sex partner any of my boys become involved with. I want my sons to have loving relationships in their lives, and I would never do anything to hinder whoever they choose to share their lives with. Not all mothers-in-law are horrible people. This may be one of the few answers straight from the horse's mouth, as it were, because I think a lot of the aggression the matriarchs in question feel might not be something they've come to terms with. A lot of them more likely have unconscious biases. However, I'd say that this mother-in-law did a good job of outlining the cause of her distaste in a way that doesn't seem unreasonable. Gold-digging harlot. My grandma hated my uncle's wife. I think it was pure jealousy. Grandma was a bit of a controlling type and hated being replaced. She treated my uncle like a child. Sadly, he died of cancer while still pretty young. Grandma tried to rewrite the obituary and managed to annoy my uncle's wife and children for a very long time. Then my mum hated my brother's first wife. There were plenty of good reasons. She was an addict, a liar, and a cheater, among other things. My mother-in-law didn't hate me, but she didn't love me either. She resented me and wanted to be the only woman in my husband's life. It was obvious that she would have felt like that about anyone. And I didn't like my son's first girlfriend. She seemed very disinterested in everything but herself and her phone. I didn't know her well or for long, but struggled to see what he liked about her beyond her looks. She was pretty. I was with a woman I thought would be my wife. We talked about it, looked at rings. She was Catholic and I'm not. Her mum hated my guts because I wasn't Catholic. Her mum would send her emails monthly saying, "He isn't Catholic." He's not rich and never will be. Find yourself a rich Catholic boy so you don't have to work, etc., etc. The mum got to the point where she spread rumors to my ex's friends about me. So now the mum and a bunch of her friends don't like me. She left me in January. I've barely spoken to her. I got in touch with her the other day and told her how badly I want her back. Turns out she got herself a wealthy Catholic boyfriend now. 3 years of being with her and being broken up for 4 months. I still dream about her every night, and she moved on a few weeks after the split. Feels bad, man. I know why my mum doesn't like my sister-in-law. She's unpleasant and mean. Every time we went to visit, she'd make sure there was at least one fight. With my brother, at least one yelling, drag-out fight. So now, every time we're trying to enjoy a visit, it's tense because we're waiting for the inevitable. Watching my nephew watch his parents scream at each other is the worst. My brother went from doing okay, having friends and a sense of humor and some crap, to now being overweight, unhappy, and having nothing to do on the weekends but drink and watch TV, which he then picks a fight about. He's so wrapped up in it, even when I try to get him alone for a while, it takes him a while to unwind. Otherwise, he puts me down so that he doesn't feel awful. It sucks. I used to be best friends with my brother, and Ma knows it too and hates her as much as she can. Mainly it's a pity because it's clear she's a miserable person. I love my daughters-in-law now, but at one time my eldest was very serious and talking marriage with a girl that no one I knew liked except him. That girl was really arrogant with no particularly good reason for being so. She didn't appear to like anyone else either. She was just very bad-natured. I was upset for my son, but also relieved when she broke it off. He had hit a bad patch and was out of work, so she started seeing someone else. Fun story time, my coworker and I both have terrible mother-in-laws. We always complained to each other because we got it, and it's hard to talk to your husband about it because they clearly love their parent and their parent treats them well. One day she turns to me and says, "I know I'm going to hate my future daughter-in-law because no matter who she is or what she does, she'll never be good enough for my baby." So my response was, "So basically you want to be your mother-in-law." Her eyes got really big and she was horrified that she would act the way our mother-in-law would without even knowing who he was possibly ever going to meet. He was in middle school at the time and years away from being that serious with anyone. I'm pretty sure that's the mentality of my own mother-in-law. I have a relative who hates their daughter-in-law because she wouldn't allow her husband to donate his bone marrow to save his brother-in-law who had leukemia. Her logic being, "One of your sons is already screwed up, why would you potentially want to screw up the second one?" My mother-in-law sees me as competition. She doesn't like that she doesn't have control of her son anymore and that he's allowed to make his own decisions. I don't play her games or feed into her narcissism, and she hates everyone unless she can benefit from them. So there's that. I'm curious if anyone will come and write here as a mother who dislikes her daughter-in-law and admit it for anything other than, "I knew she was trash, she cheated and broke his heart" kind of dislike. You know, a situation where she was clearly validated in the end. My mother-in-law would dig a grave and bury herself in it before consciously admitting, even to herself, that she didn't like me, and makes sure I know it at every chance. There's just such a cognitive dissonance in the way she thinks of herself and the way she truly is, and I bet that's quite common. My mother-in-law never liked me much. She didn't hate me, but I'm pretty sure she thought her son was better than me. Plus, to her, if you aren't blood, you aren't family. She had pictures all over her house of her other kids, of my husband, but not one single picture of me. I spent 20 years trying to get her to like me, and then suddenly I just didn't care anymore. I was pleasant, helped out when needed, but I just didn't give a rat's butt. It made everything much easier. The thing I'm proudest of is that my kids have no idea. She's dead now, and I've never said a bad word about her to them. They loved her, but at her funeral I was told to go in with the rest of her friends and well-wishers, and that I was excluded from the family-only part. Honestly, you win just for taking it with grace, and for being happy despite her preferential treatment. The funeral thing is a bit of a nasty final blow from beyond the grave, but I'd wager that people who saw that happen probably noticed and sympathized with you more afterwards. Victory through grace. Judging by other people's limited replies, I think I can offer something. However, it was a girlfriend of 2 years, not a wife, and she's an ex now, thankfully. They were 19 when they started dating. The biggest issue was a lack of maturity and low self-esteem. Typical young person control and jealousy stuff. It displayed itself in a list of behaviors, like slowly but surely starting disliking his friends and family, which led to many people being systematically removed from his life. Constant accusations of cheating when he was very devoted. He's a one-woman kind of guy. Sadly, she was a child in a woman's body. Pattern of the silly junior high romance with unwanted roughhousing, pinching, and tickling. This was done aggressively after being asked to stop. Expectations of him to join her repeatedly in activities she enjoyed but he disliked, while not willing to share in his interests. Then she'd quiz him on stuff to make sure he was paying attention and learning, identifying tree species, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm walking in the woods when I don't want to. I forgot the names. Why does it matter? I'd rather be listening to records and playing board games." Which was an activity she hated because it included his friends, by the way. Also, her family had issues which she modeled, which included belittling his lifestyle and interests. Our family has issues too, but we all support one another's quirks and eccentricities. We don't require anyone to know our secret cuckoo handshake to join in on the circus. She'd use bedroom favors as a tool to distract him when he was wanting space from her. From what he said, she wasn't even that good at it. He's just my dumb little idiot. I love him, but my God. He was never allowed to do things on his own, or he'd get constant texts and calls, so he'd have to rush what he was doing, even if it was mowing his grandma's lawn. He couldn't even have lunch with me without having hell to pay for it later. She never complimented or appreciated him. Worked below part-time, as few hours as possible, and spent all of her money on girly stuff and expected him to pay all of the bills. She never did her half of the housework and whined when he was too tired or broke to take her out. Zero goals to improve herself, go to school, or look for a decent job. And she never wore makeup, like never, but started to at the end when she'd go out alone with her sister to bars. Never dressed up for him, like for real. Oh, and to be clear, the makeup isn't the issue here. The fact is she was getting dolled up to go to the bars without him as their relationship was nearing the end, but never cared to doll herself up for him, ever, is the point. She collected pets and then neglected them, but expected him to take care of them. Also expected him to help her family with manual jobs around their houses. She had depression issues, and my whole family has a truckload of mental illnesses, so I don't mean the depression was a flaw of hers. However, even when given compassion and options to seek help, she refused to do anything about it. If someone's depressed enough to complain about it constantly, to the degree that it causes it in someone else around them, it's time to pop some happy pills or reconsider one's romantic suitability. There was a lot of subtle manipulation and goodness knows what other goofy crap she came up with at the time, to play games or gauge his reactions. And for what it's worth, we as a family all gave a big effort to like her, get along with her, and treat her like family without judgment. We even paid for and took her on vacation with us. After they broke up and he was in his "screw that, I don't want a girlfriend" phase, he had tons of girls after him. He has a new girlfriend now. She isn't without her own issues, but she also has a lot of great qualities that more than make up for them. Nobody's perfect, especially my little man, but she makes him feel good about himself and she makes him laugh. She's a definite keeper. In short, his ex-girlfriend was a psycho witch. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My mother hates my wife of 9 years and always has. My wife is half Hispanic and has a son from a previous marriage, had a father who was an ex-con, and my mother feels that my wife was taking me from her. I'm the only child who lived near them. She would go as far to invite me and my wife's daughter to do things and not my wife and stepson. My father wasn't much better either. Needless to say that I had to cut ties with my parents. I'm much happier since then. My mum was hesitant at first because, oh no, 2 men, how am I going to get grandbabies? Shh, Mum, it's okay. You have 2 more sons, more chances with my siblings, but also none of us owe you grandbabies. She also seems to struggle with her perception of my partner's intelligence and anxiety. On the other hand, my partner's mother constantly whines about how I lack a real job, I'm physically disabled and autistic, making most typical entry-level jobs hell if not impossible. I do the budgeting and whatnot. My partner is dyscalculic and learning disabled, which ties into my mum's issue regarding smarts. We aren't on benefits and I aren't as well. She knows all of this, but that's not good enough, of course. We work really, really well together for the record, almost a brains and brawn sort of deal. Our strengths and weaknesses suit each other nicely. My mum hated my wife and I don't know why. My wife is beautiful, smart, kind, and has never done anything to my mum. I mean, frankly, my wife is way too good for me. She's always been nice and a great mum to her grandkids. I guess my mum has this way of making these kinds of backhanded comments. I never noticed it and kind of dismissed my wife about it for the first 5 years of our marriage. Then one day my mother admitted that she didn't like my wife and that was it. I haven't talked to my family in 2 years now, and it was the best decision I've ever made. Yep, this is why most of those mothers in these stories at least go to the effort of pretending to like their spouses, even if their faces and actions say otherwise. My mother-in-law is a fundamentalist Christian who pretends to like me, but I know that if I broke up with her son, she would be overjoyed. Over the past 10 years, she's said and done things to show her true colors. Myself and her ex-pastor son are atheists. His parents are relentless and creative in their tactics for us to return to the fold. She said some incredibly rude things about non-Christians. What she doesn't consider is this is one of the many reasons why we don't believe or participate. Okay, so I don't like fruit pies, big frickin' whoop. This became a huge deal to her. When we first started dating, she told my significant other that she's not like us. When he questioned her about it, she told him it was because I don't like pie. He basically rolled his eyes at her. Yeah, so for every birthday for 6 years, she'd bake me an apple pie. I'd politely choke down a piece and she'd stand smiling her frickin' face off and say, "Oh, right, you don't like pie. You shouldn't feel like you need to eat that for my benefit." My saving grace is that I'm a clean eater now, over 60 pounds down, and I don't eat sugar, meat, flour, stuff like that. This has created its own issue. I'm very appreciative when we're invited for a meal, even though I now have to bring my own food. She'll not stop putting marshmallows on the sweet potato, sugar in the peas, bacon fat in her salad dressing, heaps of butter and sour cream in the potatoes, and then complains to me that she can't seem to get to the same weight as me. She's got 30 plus years on me, and every time she sees me she asks my current weight, and when I tell her I don't know, she'll pout and grumble under her breath about it. Which, I work out every frickin' day and I basically just eat vegetables. This is not frickin' easy, and it's also not for anyone. I don't judge anyone for their weight, that's your crap to deal with. I have plenty of my own baggage I'm lugging around. She's actually grabbed my hips and jiggled me like a side of beef, trying to guess my weight. Don't get me wrong, I really do love and appreciate her and what she's done for us. I feel that she's made 0 attempts to get to know me. She basically knows where I work and where I live, and that's it. But she's never asked me about my life ever. She has no frickin' clue that both my brothers are gay. Huh. My son should have chosen me. My mother-in-law hates me. She'll talk crap behind my back, but try to be nice as pie to my face. How do I know this? Because it's my husband she talks to. According to my mother-in-law, even though we all started out on council estates, because they bought their own home, I'm not the right class. Because I have a degree, I'm taking the mickey out of my husband's intelligence. Because I'm 7 years older than my husband, I've obviously brainwashed him into abandoning her. Because I don't make a ton of money, I'm a gold-digging harlot who only wants him for his money, despite him being depressed, jobless, and not wanting to be alive when I met him. And because I have tattoos, I've obviously got massive issues. My husband eventually got told that he should move back home with them, and as a sop, he could still be in a relationship with me. He told her that if she made me choose, she'd lose. She's been coldly civil to me since. So one of my sons got me to make an account quickly to give an actual perspective from a mother-in-law. For me, I don't like my other son's new wife because she's a lazy witch, to put it bluntly. They're both 26 now, and she doesn't lift a finger to help do any housework or laundry, and she seems to expect him to do everything for her, and it feels like he's a doormat to me in that respect, even though he probably doesn't see it that way. You go into their house and there'll be piles of dirty dishes just lying around unwashed, and it's disgusting. Relationships should mean shared responsibility, but she does not do her part. On top of that, it's like she treats our home like hers, and just makes herself at home around our pool and hot tub. She uses them more than we do, and we live here. The only good thing I have to say is she doesn't seem to be after him for money. We're a well-off family, and he's making more than 100k at 26, and should be making 500k by 35 or 40 at this rate. And she builds up more savings than he does, despite earning 4 times more. Honestly, I just wish she'd do more to help out. Even just offering would be nice, even if we don't need it, but as long as they're happy, I try to keep out of it. My mother doesn't like my brother's wife because said mother happens to be a narcissistic butthole who wanted him to pick her as the number 1 in his life. My mother-in-law hates my fiancé simply because he's a recovering smack addict. The fact that I'm one too seems to make no difference to her. What's more, his family is so lovely to me, and it makes me really sad that he can't have the same experiences with my family. I'll admit that it could be intimidating to know that your offspring is attached to someone going through a struggle like that, but hate, as always, is the wrong way, man. I can't understand dragging down someone who's actively fighting to come out the other side of addiction. Do your best to help them or be welcoming so that they thrive. My in-laws didn't like me at first because we're different races and speak different languages. They came around when they saw how happy their son was and when I started learning their language. It's been several years now, and I can't speak their language, but I understand a lot, so we get along okay. I can answer this question from the other side. I'm a daughter whose mother doesn't really like my husband. His personality doesn't jive with hers, which I could see at first because he can be a bit tightly strung, where she's really laid back, but I guess she won't admit that her daughter is also tightly strung and we're a great match. In addition, he didn't go to college, his family isn't as solid as ours, and his upbringing isn't as good. We also eloped, not in the pregnant teenager sense of the word, but we didn't have a wedding, which she seems to blame him for, and that kind of seals the deal on her dislike of my husband and opinion of my marriage. She doesn't really ask about him, and when I mention him, her answers are curt and seem bothered. We don't currently live in my home state, which I'm hoping to change very soon. As long as she doesn't make her unwarranted opinions known and is able on some level to fake it, we'll be fine. It's not ideal, but it's likely how it'll be. Her mind is made up about him, and the things she said about him or us before we married aren't things I'll ever fully heal from. She has a way, however, of subtly saying things without saying things, and if that's been going on with my family, we'll have to address it. My stepmother-in-law hates me because we have the same first, middle, and last names. My real mother-in-law died, but I felt like she was the only one to try to understand me. What's your "'tis but a scratch" moment, and how bad was your injury, really? I got hit by a car my freshman year of high school. I went flying, lost consciousness for a split second when I hit the ground, thank God for the helmet. When I came to, people were all around me asking if I was okay and what had happened. I was like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm just gonna get back on my bike and go now. But I didn't really move. Then people started asking me to call an ambulance and my mum. I was like, why? I'm good. I even told my mum on the phone I was still gonna bike home. But as I was saying that, the people around me had started to move one of my legs and I watched as my foot proceeded to not move. I had broken both bones in my leg completely in half and part of my ankle. Just pure adrenaline and shock. I also vividly remember thinking, is this what it feels like to get hit by a car? Also, the leg wasn't setting right, probably from movement, and the doctor decided to put me on laughing gas as he tried to crack my bones back into place. I was in a stupor laughing as I felt my bones grind. I'm a bartender in a nightclub. One night while I was working, I was pouring a drink while I reached back with my other hand to open a fridge, and that's when I heard a pop and got a huge pain in my back and shoulder area. The pain was pretty bad, but I was sure it was a pulled muscle and there wouldn't be much point in seeing a doctor other than getting meds. So I waited. I fought through the pain, which was so bad at times it was making it hard to breathe. That was Friday. I called off my shift on Saturday and had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday off before I went back to work Wednesday. Once I biked into work. All in all, I waited 9 days total before finally deciding to go to the ER. I had a collapsed lung, called a spontaneous pneumothorax. 20 minutes after getting to the ER, I was put into emergency surgery. I was essentially breathing with only one lung, and any major impact to my chest would have collapsed the other one and probably killed me. That happened to me when I was in school just 3 months ago. I suddenly started not being able to breathe, but I was like, I'm sure it's nothing. When I got home, I actually slept for 3 hours, but I woke up from the pain. Me and my family thought it was corona, so we went to the hospital. I was quite shocked to learn that I had a collapsed lung. But the worst part wasn't the lung, it was the operation and the aftermath. Having a tube inside you for a week hurts like hell. Haven't slept for 5 days during my stay there. I got hit by a car while riding my bicycle, flew through the air, bounced off his windshield, breaking his windshield, my helmet, and 2 vertebrae. Then I lay on the ground where my kneecap shattered and bone was sticking out of the skin. As I lay there in shock, unaware of how badly I was injured, I thought, I might be able to get on my bike and ride home. Oof. Were you thinking this because you were delusional or were you just uninsured in the US? But yeah, car crashes are weird. You don't normally hurt for the first few minutes afterwards. I guess the body just can't contemplate being hit by 1 ton of metal. Rolled my car, got out of the car bewildered and in shock, noticing a kink in my neck. As someone who constantly cracks my knuckles, back and neck, my first instinct was, I'm not hurt. Thank God, I just need to crack my neck and I'll be fine. Luckily, before I finished processing that train of thought, I was held down in C-spine by the person behind me who had watched my crash. Luckily, he was an off-duty firefighter. I'd broken 3 vertebrae in my neck. I just couldn't tell it yet from the adrenaline and shock. Required full surgery to fuse together with bone from my hip and plates and screws. Had there not been someone behind me and had I proceeded with my "'tis but a scratch" instincts, I'd be paralyzed or dead. A couple of weeks ago, I stepped on an anthill and got a bunch of ant bites on my ankles. 3 to 4 days later, the itching was unbearable. I wasn't sleeping, my legs were swollen, and no amount of Benadryl or antihistamine cream was helping the itching. I finally went to a clinic to get a shot or whatever, because I was clearly having some sort of allergic reaction. It was a staph infection that had spread from my ankles up to my knees. I would have died if this was 1920 instead of 2020. I was on antibiotics for 10 days, and now several weeks later, the dead skin from the infection is still flaking off. In short, scratched ant bites with unclean hands and gave myself a staph infection. Ignored it for several days because it was just some bug bites. My little sister fell down 15 steps at our grandma's house when she was a toddler, got up, giggled, and went to go eat some snacks. This other time, when she was still a toddler, she was supposed to be napping. We were in the living room and just heard a huge thud. We ran to the room thinking she'd fallen out of bed. Nope, she had somehow managed to pull the TV down, and it fell on top of her. This was the early 2000s. TVs were huge and heavy as frick. She was laying there in the snow angel position, and my mum freaked out. When we got the TV off her, she got up and asked for ice. Not to soothe the pain, but to eat. My little sister was and still is a champ. Back in my baseball days, when I was pitching, I completely lost a pitch, and it beamed a guy in the jaw. He threw his bat down, glared at me with the glariest of glares ever glared, spat out blood, and then calmly ran to first base as though nothing had happened. It was terrifyingly badass. I was mountain biking and fell off. I fell down a part of the mountain and onto a road where I almost got hit by a car. I got up quickly, thanked the driver for not killing me, and then got back on that bike. I knew the road would meet up with the trail I was on, so I could meet up with my group who hadn't seen me fall. When I got to them, one of them looked at me and was like, "What happened?" I got off the bike, walked over whilst we waited for the others to catch up, and just said I fell off. He then looked at me and was like, "What the hell happened?" I'm like, "It's nothing. A few cuts and scratches on my hands and arms. My leg was bleeding from earlier, but that was it." Then I looked down and realized I'd scratched off half the skin on my leg from falling on the road. Basically, it was a bad case of road burn. From all the adrenaline, I hadn't even felt it. They called someone to come and get me from the mountains. I wasn't allowed to continue, and one of the other riders saw my leg and decided they wanted to stop too. I just went to the pharmacy, grabbed some wipes and bandages, then we got a drink while we waited for everyone else to finish. I broke my arm at the skating rink and skated for an hour before I even left. Then, after I left there, I went to a playground with my boyfriend at the time and hung out. I didn't go to the hospital until the next day. A few years ago, I was sick. It wasn't fun, but it was only a bug. I'd be okay in a couple of days max. I started to get an unusual pain in my abdomen as the day wore on, but to me it was just a side effect of all the throwing up I'd been doing. I spent the night in the spare room for 2 reasons. 1, because I was so frickin' hot, and 2, so that in case I needed to get up, I didn't disturb my partner, who'd be getting up early for work. I managed to get an okay night of sleep, with the vomiting having stopped, but I still felt like crap. When my partner came to see me before he went to work, he asked how I was. I still felt terrible, but it was a tummy bug. I wasn't going to be instantly better. That sharp pain was still there, though. On hearing that I was still in pain, he insisted on taking me to the hospital. I didn't think it was all necessary, but I was too exhausted to argue. When we got to the hospital, I made damn sure the person at the front desk knew I thought this was a waste of time. After a lot of prodding and questions about if I was pregnant, it turned out my appendix was in the process of rupturing. I got blackout drunk while camping and fell hands first onto the grate that had been over the fire for hours. My wife and friends were all freaking out, thinking I definitely had third-degree burns. I came out of my blackout in the bathroom with all of them trying to wash my hands in cold water. When all the soot came off, I was somehow completely unharmed. Since then, I've been known as the Unburned. I'd like to thank this Targaryen for writing into the channel. I'm sorry that your family haven't been in a good episode of TV since Season 4 of Game of Thrones. I broke my toe running up the stairs, and I ran back down the stair thinking I'd just stubbed it until my toe then turned purple. A couple of years ago, my mate broke my nose in class, and the teacher told me to be quiet. My first job was as a butcher, and I came into work one day with a raging hangover. I sharpened the knives, they were the crap ones that went blunt all the time, and then I immediately proceeded to cut my finger open. I thought nothing of it, went about my shift, and when I got home I put a proper dressing on it. I found out it was as deep as the bone, and I wouldn't get feeling back in the end of it for literally years. When I was very young, I pulled a tablecloth and managed to dump a freshly boiled pot of tea all over myself. I got rushed to the hospital. My skin was red and bubbling. I should have been in floods of tears. Instead, I proudly pointed to my ruined skin and proclaimed to the paramedic that I did that. Over 30 years later, and I still have some scars, but I'm definitely no longer that hardcore. My teacher said that one time she was in college and she was in a classroom and her foot was stuck on something, so she just yanked it back and was fine, but she was looking up the whole time. Then she got back to her dorm and took off her shoe. It was soaked in blood and her foot was stabbed by a loose piece of metal. When I was a small idiot child, I had a habit of gripping door frames when walking through the door. I did not discriminate between the latch side or the hinge side. Door got closed and my fingers got crushed in the hinge, to the point where there's dark purple lines across them and a tangible groove. My mum started completely freaking out over the injury, but I, the brave little idiot that I was, saw the distress that she was in at what had happened, put on my bravest face, with my eyes welling up in tears from the pain, and said, "Don't worry, Mummy, it'll heal." I was right, it did, but still. I broke my wrist while snowboarding, stuffed some snow in my glove, and did a couple more runs. I walked under a pine tree barefoot and stepped on something that mildly hurt. Went back inside and I was cleaning my bathroom. Then I looked in the mirror and saw whole bloody footprints covering the floor behind me in a line down the hall. For a minute I thought I was being haunted or something. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was making a ninja mask. I had a piece of cloth and I was trying to cut the eye holes out of it using a small steak knife. No, it wasn't on my face. I wasn't quite that stupid. But I was holding the cloth and cutting with the knife, then the knife slipped and went straight into my pinky finger. I had to actually pull the knife out. It went right beside my joint and stabbed through the flesh on my pinky. I pulled the knife out and blood was just pouring out of me, which was weird to me at the time. I didn't realize a pinky would bleed that much. The worst part is, I was home alone. It didn't really hurt that badly, strange as it may seem. It was honestly no worse than a regular cut, pain-wise. Anyway, the blood was coming out at a rate that I'd never seen before, so I went to the bathroom and wrapped like 7 band-aids around it, and then took some masking tape and wrapped that around all the band-aids. I was like, surely that will stop the bleeding. I said, frick the ninja mask, and just sat on my couch watching TV for a bit. Then I noticed the tape was starting to slide off. I'd bled through everything and all the band-aids in maybe 5 minutes max. So I got some paper towels and decided to hold pressure on it, but the cut wasn't very symmetrical. I couldn't figure out how to get the skin back together. I did the best I could and bled through a bunch of paper towels, and finally I was like, screw it, I'm gonna have to call 911. So I called 911, they came out, and by the time they got there, I was feeling rather weak. There was blood all over my sinks, the bathroom and kitchen one, and some on the floor. They transported me to the hospital and gave me stitches. Healed up as good as new in a couple of weeks. The doctor said I was lucky I didn't sever any tendons. My mum came to the ER to take me home. It was kind of an awkward ride. She whined at me some for being too old to be doing this kind of crap. The kicker is, yeah, I really was too old to be having accidents like that. You're probably picturing a 10 or 11-year-old. Yeah, nah, I was 19. Separated 2 ribs when I slipped going up a staircase. I went down to radiology at work and got an x-ray, looked at it and said, okay, no breaks. I just walked over to the ER and got 2 big rolls of ACE bandages. Went back to my desk and took off my shirt and t-shirt. My boss walks in, sees the bruises on my chest. Then I said, no biggie, just don't make me laugh. I told him what had happened, wrapped myself up and went on with my life. When I was a teenager, I got jumped by a hoodlum trying to mug me. I was just walking along and they snuck up behind me and cracked me in the spine with an iron bar. Somehow, the blow, instead of being painful, just went completely numb. So I turned and said, what the frick was that? I'll never forget the look of fear on the guy's face. He just dropped the bar and ran. I still get a weird numb spot on my back from time to time. This is definitely the closest we've actually come to the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail thus far. I'd guess if you've psyched yourself up enough to brain and potentially kill someone, you're already pretty freaked out. Then seeing them walk it off like that would set off all kinds of panic. I absolutely shattered my wrist, pulverized a couple of carpals into dust, fractured my scaphoid bone and flipped it 180 degrees. Then spent 2 days trying to convince myself it was but a simple strain. When I finally went to the doctor, they rushed me into emergency surgery. Later found out the doctors couldn't believe I wasn't incapacitated by pain. Whoops! I was a kid visiting family in West Virginia and was playing with some other kids, which somehow involved me being in a tree. I got a little cut on my hand and was inconsolable. Ran to the house for my mum to make it better. She put the tiniest of band-aids on it. When I turned around and started walking out of the house, she started yelling, and I just looked at her like, "What?" There was a trail of blood coming from the back of my leg. I hadn't even noticed that. I actually got stabbed one time in my lower thigh. Walked to the hospital with my coat covering it, because I didn't want to freak out any kids. All thanks to the wonderful thing called alcohol. Stung like a witch for the next day, though. When I was younger, like really young, I'd escaped from the house, and at the time my dad was just about to drive to work. I'd managed to get just behind the wheel of the car and got run over. Then I was rushed to the hospital, and at around midnight my parents got a call from the hospital because I was running around the place like a lunatic, waking up all the other kids, and basically I got away with a car tire mark and that was it. In short, I was a super baby who got run over and didn't break a single thing. Fell off my bike and onto some wet gravel when I was 8. No big deal, scraped my knee and got soaked. Played the rest of the day outside and then came home for dinner. I went to the bathroom, and when I pulled my jeans off, I realized I wasn't soaked from the puddle. It was blood. I'd sliced a huge gash in my knee, and when I pulled my pants down, a flap of skin pulled away and it started bleeding again. My first stitches. I broke my tailbone and didn't know for 6 months, then found out when I got an x-ray. I've always had moderate back pain, but I also have a high pain tolerance. It's the only bone I've ever broken. I ran into the top of a door frame. I did the whole cartoon, head outside, legs flying inside, and then falling on my back thing. My head hurt a tiny bit, so I covered my forehead with my hand with some pressure for a minute. When I removed my hand and tried to get up, my friends who were crowded over me collectively gasped. Turned out I'd split my forehead open and you could see the bone. I literally wouldn't have known if they hadn't been so freaked out. I couldn't feel a thing. Got 5 stitches and a small scar near my hairline. When I fell through a window and cut my stomach open, my colon and stomach both fell out of my body while I caught, and then looked up at my friends bleeding out. Was in shock, but alas, 'tis but a scratch, and I'm still here today. A slab of glass shattered and fell on me and my mum. I checked my mum for any injuries and went to clean up the mess, which was promptly followed by my mother screaming and flipping out. Apparently I'd left a trail of blood around the house because the glass left a deep gash on my foot. She even scolded me because I was laughing at the whole situation. Fun times. When I was in elementary school, we used to play this game at recess where we'd try and see how many people we could fit in the tube slide without the person at the bottom falling out. When it came my turn to be the person at the bottom, I thought I was being smart by bracing my hands against the wall of the slide. The next kid came sliding down and his foot hit the perfect spot on my hand and dislocated my thumb at the second joint. The other kids were laughing that I could only hold one kid in, when I held my hand up and smiled and said, "But watch how fast I can make my thumb grow," and pulled it back into place with a loud pop. One of the kids got freaked out and told on me, and I got sent home for the day, but I felt like the coolest 4th grader there ever was for not freaking out when my bone wasn't where it should have been. I got into a car accident and then showed up to practice an hour or so later. One of my students, I'd impressed upon them that there would be no late work unless hooked up to tubes in the hospital. It was their research paper final in the pre-digital submission days. There was a college freshman who'd been given a ridiculously fast car by parents who'd also chosen a ridiculous acid green color. His car stood out. Another kid in the class on his way to class said he saw the ridiculous car smashed and an ambulance at the side of the road. He stopped and approached. The child owner of that ridiculous car was being loaded into an ambulance on a stretcher and sees the other student. Then yells, "My research paper! Front seat! Get it to her!" This good Samaritan did so and submitted the blood-smudged, bedraggled document. The guy comes to pick it up a week and a half later, in a wheelchair because he broke one leg, sprained the other ankle, and also sprained a wrist. He's been for 20 years my gold standard of handing in your paper. I have to know if he passed that paper. Honestly, getting back a paper covered in viscera that a teacher has also written grades on would just be such a unique thing. That would go on my wall. It would be even funnier if after all it took to get it there, it was an F. A field arrow went through part of my thumb. Lucky you didn't get it in the knee, then you'd no longer be an adventurer. When I was 6, I badly bruised my arm when performing cartwheels and backflips, and at first when I fell it was no big deal until my arm was swollen and I couldn't bend it. I had to wear a cast for a few weeks. When I was a child, I was pretty stupid, so I was playing Don't Let the Paper Touch the Ground. It's where you just keep hitting a piece of paper in the air, and then I ran into my kitchen while playing and smashed my head on the corner of a table, and it was gushing blood. I didn't even notice my head cut open right in the middle of my eyes. I'm very lucky I still have vision, apparently. I only realized my head was cut open when my sister looked at me and just started screaming her vocal cords out. Well, I was playing football, or what you Yanks call soccer, and then I twisted my ankle. I had to stop, but managed to walk to the coach to get home. Walked from the coach stop to my house, which was about 1.5 miles, and then went to sleep. I woke up the next day and my ankle was the size of a grapefruit and I had to call an ambulance due to quite severe pain. The medical examiner assumed my ankle was crushed by a very heavy object as I'd fractured 5 bones, broken my leg, and had extensive cartilage and ligament damage. I've been told now that I'll never heal to 100% again. 3 years later and I still have pain and my foot goes numb all the time. And this happened 2 weeks after when my first cast was removed. I had a piece of an air chisel break off, about the size of a BB, and then insert itself into my hand. I had thick latex gloves on. I thought it just hit me and bounced off. It wasn't until I realized my hand was really wet and my glove was sloshing that I noticed it was full of blood. What's the cruelest prank you've ever seen that went way too far? 20 years ago, a friend of mine was prank kidnapped on Halloween, driven to a cornfield and left tied up and blindfolded for an hour. It wasn't funny. The friends that did this to him actually got some time in prison. It was just a regular kidnapping. One of the guys on my high school track team was pantsed directly in front of the girls from the other team. He wasn't wearing underwear. The person who pantsed him was one of his close friends. Yeah, that happened to me when I was a kid. I had enough friends and self-esteem that I wasn't too devastated, and the girls were all really sweet, like, oh, we didn't really see what happened. But I still never talked to that friend ever again, and I was a bit traumatized for a while. Not so much a prank, but in high school there was a girl who was on the spectrum, and she was showing off a dance, and these cheerleaders were clearly laughing at her. The thing is that girl didn't realize they were making fun of her. They told her to do it again just so that they could laugh more. I was 14 and going out to eat with my first girlfriend and my mum at Gym Boys. Just like 90% of 14-year-old males, I suffered from acne pretty badly. We were eating and having a good time, and out of nowhere my mum looks to my girlfriend and asks, "Do you like popping bumps?" My eyes widened. She knew I was horrified by her question. My girlfriend just got quiet and her face went red. My mum then proceeded to say, "What? It's not like she can't see them, and you need someone to do something about them." Then laughed and then got mad that no one else thought it was funny and ruined the rest of the evening. I could never understand doing something like that to my child. There was that YouTube family that was like Daddy of 5 or something, where one of the kids was literally just ridiculed for the entertainment of strangers constantly. They'd do horrible stuff to this boy and then say it was a prank for the channel, and he'd be absolutely destroyed and scream that he hated YouTube. Anything done as a prank for YouTube? I mean, it's almost as bad as just child mistreatment pranking for YouTube. The channel was called Daddy of 5, I think. Thankfully, the boy and his sister were taken from that horrific family and have found a better home. As these suggestions often do, this one sent the narrator on a Google search binge, and my god, these parents on this channel ended up under supervised probation after they took a plea deal, and rightfully so. They treated their kids downright awfully. I have no idea what radio station this was on, as I was only a kid, but they used to do prank phone calls. I have little to no recollection of many of them except this one, because even as a kid I could tell it was just wrong. The radio host rang up a woman and advised that he was the manager of her husband's company, and he was very sorry to tell her that he had been involved in an accident with some heavy machinery and it had resulted in his death. As you would expect, the woman was beside herself with being told her husband had just died. She was wailing on the phone, and the radio host couldn't really get another word in to explain that it was a joke, and then they just cut off the phone call and played a song. Even as a kid, I knew it was a really stupid and cruel thing to do, and I'm pretty sure that was the last time they did a prank phone call on that channel. I remember back a few years ago, it was all over the news here in the UK that a nurse self-deleted after falling for a prank call from an Australian radio station. The TV show WB Superstar from the early 2000s. It was a show like American Idol, but they were actually looking for the worst singers. But they told the contestants they were looking for the best singers until the very end of the competition, when they revealed the truth to the winner after their final performance in front of a live audience. It was a very cruel show. A girl wrote an elaborate love letter pretending to be another girl in class and handed it to me. I was shocked to receive my first love letter and felt like garbage when I found out it was fake. I remember when the ALS challenge was popular. I read an article about a prank played on a high schooler. These kids told him it was just water in the bucket, but it was also pee, cigarette butts, all sorts of disgusting stuff. Then they put the video all over the internet as though the bucket wasn't enough. That girl who hid her boyfriend's wheelchair on YouTube. That crap wasn't funny. At my high school, 100 years ago back in the 80s, some football players talked a special education kid into continually sneaking over and grabbing a girl's butt right in the middle of the main area during lunchtime with tons of people around. This kid was really well liked at the school, and it was perfectly obvious that he was only doing it because they were being nice to him. Luckily, the girl who was the victim talked to him really calmly and explained to him it wasn't something nice to do, and that the kids who seemed nice were actually being mean to him. If I recall, the kid's teacher wanted him to go back to eating lunch in his class, but lots of students talked her down, and there was never another incident. He was still well liked. The girl who was pranked was a really popular and successful student, and while I didn't know her, because she was a couple of years ahead of me, I knew enough about her to say with confidence that she had a great career ahead of her. Don't think anything happened to the football players. The story has stuck with me because, 1, the cruelty of the prank, based on manipulating a kid not able to understand he was being used, and 2, the poise and maturity of the girl who didn't get angry with the kid, even though it happened to her in front of half the school. A friend of a friend in high school had her boyfriend pretend that he had died. He had one of his friends call her saying he had died in a car accident, and had someone else calling up pretending to be a doctor from the hospital. She was hysterical. Later that day, after she kept asking the fake doctor which hospital it was so she could be there, she found out it was all a prank, bro, to see if she cared. Horrible. Anyway, they broke up. To this day, it's the nastiest prank I've seen in person. A group of 5 boys decided to throw rocks from an overpass at the cars below. One of the rocks ended up going through the car's windshield and killed the driver. The boys got charged with second-degree murder. Darren Brown, the English illusionist, did a TV show some years back. Long story short, he convinced a young lad who'd got really drunk the night before that he'd killed a girl. They set him up so badly. Psychologically, it looked like they'd broken this kid's soul, to the point where everything they'd set up, like the actors, the fake police, it made the lad so convinced he'd killed someone that he handed himself into the fake police station and admitted to a murder. I'll never forget the one tear trickling down this kid's face in the devastation at what he thought he'd done. Then bloody Darren Brown appears from behind a screen like, surprise! It was frickin' cruel, and it stuck with me for a long time. I was once pranked by someone, a classmate probably, and they told me they were going to kill my best friend who was in the same class as me. It was really frickin' weird. The school never figured out who it was, they just asked my friend if he had any enemies. It was like, bro, we're 11. I remember seeing a video where they switched the pregnancy test to a fake positive one on their friend struggling with infertility. That is so messed up. My dad told me that when he was a kid, a friend of his gave him a glass of lemonade. It was Drano mixed with something else, and my dad vomited for hours. Thankfully, he survived and went on to have kids, but his vocal cords were never the same. It's truly insane how many of these so-called pranks are just straight-up crimes. I mean, this is some form of assault, right? Someone poisoned your dad and did lasting damage. Oh, I'll never forget it. A buddy and I were on a double date of sorts, though I was mainly winging it for him. The girl I was with, let's call her Kay, shared a heartbreaking story she thought was absolutely hilarious. In high school, Kay and her fellow cheerleaders invited the most ostracized girl in their class to a party as a joke. Said girl was overjoyed and couldn't believe it. She was dirt poor though. She ended up buying a new pair of overpriced jeans for the party, and it was obvious. She showed up with some of the tags still on them because she'll have to return them the next day. The cheerleaders notice and begin to plot. The 4 of us are sitting at dinner as Kay continues to relate what happened, laughing in fits the whole time. Someone spilled an entire glass of red wine on a love seat at the party. Kay immediately sits down opposite the spill and beckons the poor girl to sit down next to her to chat. The girl does so and immediately ruins the overpriced jeans. Everyone laughs as she runs out the door in tears. Kay casually finished the story as a sizable lump formed in my throat. Sometimes it's the small, sharp cruelties that cut the deepest. A friend of mine faked her self-deletion to get back at her boyfriend for April Fool's Day. I'd helped her without knowing she was going that far. Her boyfriend had claimed she had been sleeping around and dumped her when she told him she was pregnant. You know what? I don't miss living in dorms, and I don't miss either of them. Prank war going on between two houses that were next to each other in San Diego, California, circa 2014. My cousin lived in one of the houses, and this happened when I went to visit him a few years back. House number 1 pulled a prank that led to a member of house number 2 being late for his first day of work. It was collateral damage, but the guy ended up getting fired for it. The guy who lost his job came home furious. He then took a 15-pound medicine ball and painted it to look just like a soccer ball. He tossed the medicine ball into the front yard of house 1 and waited. When he saw the guy come out of the house, he yells, "Hey Josh, can you kick that ball back over here?" The guy proceeds to make a running start and square up and kick the, quote, soccer ball with every ounce of strength he had. Poor guy went down almost immediately in tears and screaming. He broke 3 bones in his right foot. Just brutal. In 6th grade, I opened my locker and I found a note from a boy that I had a crush on falling out saying he liked me too. A bunch of girls in my grade were there when I found it and were super happy for me, or so I thought. When I went to the boy to ask him about it, he said he didn't write it, and a group of girls who were there when I found the note had written it. I turned around and sure enough, they were laughing. But it crushed me. Not that the boy didn't like me back, but because I didn't think these girls I'd gone to school with since 1st grade were that mean. A couple of weeks later, the group played a similar joke on one of the girls who was actually in on the prank against me, and I got a genuine apology from her after she realized how bad I must have felt. None of the other girls ever apologized. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a kid, somehow my classmates found it funny to wee in other people's cans of soda. I did not have a good childhood. When I was in elementary school, some boy came back from the restroom, said he couldn't wash his hands because there was pee in the soap dispenser. Somehow a kid had gotten it open, peed in it, and put it back in the dispenser. Someone asked a guy to be her boyfriend. She said yes, and the next day she invited all of her friends to tell him that she did it as a joke. This happened to me. I got the courage to ask her out in junior high, and she said yes. I took her to a movie and asked her if she wanted to be boyfriend and girlfriend, and again, she said yes. She carried on like we were dating, saying things like, "I'm so happy we're finally together." The girl would walk around holding my hand in school, and I was in heaven. I couldn't have been happier at that moment in my life because I was dating my dream girl. All the popular guys would snicker when we walked by, but I didn't care because I was just too happy. A week or so went by and she was laughing when she said it was just a joke. I've never been so devastated. Just to update on what happened down the road, years later, karma caught up to my then fake girlfriend. She got really into smack and skanked out a bit. She did end up pulling it together, but not until she was well outside the popular pool. As for me, I did have trust issues for quite some time, even through college. But now I'm very happily married to a wonderful woman who's never treated me wrong, and I couldn't be happier. For all of you who've posted similar issues, I guess we share a hard lesson in life. People can be crappy, but in the long run, they just turn into good internet fodder. Keep your heads up. I just got pregnant. Aren't you happy for me? This was said on April 1st in front of a woman who had just lost a baby a month before. I saw a guy tip over the porta potty with someone in it. That memory was clear. I think it was his girlfriend. Oh yeah, I think I've seen something like this too. A guy was tripped over in a porta potty by some rando looking for a laugh. The guy gets out covered in that blue gunk and other nasty stuff, absolutely fuming, and proceeded to beat the prankster within inches of his life with a brick. He got some jail time and the other guy was hospitalized. I don't think bludgeoning your prankster is right, but I can definitely say I understand why he did it. Yeah, I mean, I agree with this sentiment. If you do this to someone, you accept that there's going to be a justifiable degree of ill will aimed your way, and you do not know how they're going to react. But this is about one of the worst things you can do to someone without physically damaging or emotionally traumatizing them, so it's going to be at the far end of their capability. The first time I met my brother's new girlfriend, she pulled me aside and started crying. She told me that she was pregnant, but my brother wasn't ready to tell anyone. She asked me to check up on him because he was really nervous. A couple of days went by and I texted her to see how she was doing and if my brother was doing okay and if they needed anything. She asked me what I was talking about. I said the baby. She replied, "Oh, you believed me. I was only joking. I'm not pregnant. I can't believe you fell for that." This wasn't some teenager either. She was 30. And yes, I told my brother. Yes, he still ended up marrying her, and almost 10 years later, I still refused to trust her. A group of girls at my high school told another girl that they were hanging out at one of their houses at 9 near a train station, but they really just made up a time and place that would make her stranded at the last train stop with no more trains home. In the spirit of cruel revenge, she should have just gotten her mom to call each of those girls and say, "Josie didn't come home today. She said she was meeting with you. Do you know anything?" In high school, one of the cutest girls in my grade came up to me and told me she had a crush on me and wanted to go out on a date. I was skeptical because no one had ever asked me out before, but I was growing into my body pretty well and was definitely more attractive than I was as an early teen, so I just figured puberty was doing some good work for me. We were 16 and 17 and had both just got our licenses, so she said she'd meet me at the movie theater and we'd go have dinner after the movie. I told my mum and she got all excited and helped me pick out an outfit and took pictures of me before my first ever date. Cringe as frick, but you know how it goes. I went and got my hair cut and my car detailed so I'd be rolling in fresh, you know? And believe me, I was looking tasty. Fresh shave, hair edged up, sharp enough to cut glass. I was dripped out before the phrase even existed. So I showed up at the theater a couple of minutes early and I was waiting for her, and after like 15 minutes I was thinking maybe I'll call her to make sure she didn't have an emergency come up or something. We didn't have texting back then, you see. So I call her and she answers on speakerphone and like 5 other girls are all laughing at me saying things like, "Haha, he actually showed up." So yeah, it was all just a prank to hurt my feelings. Joke's on me, I guess. My so-called friends had my mum drop me off at the mall and we hung out until near my bedtime. Mind you, this was back when there were pagers, and for the generation that grew up with smartphones, back before cell phones were something everyone used, there used to be the pager. So, I asked my friends when we were going back home because my mum had talked to their mothers about someone dropping me off home. My parents both worked. Anyways, they decided to tell me that their mum will pick them up from this door and I should just go ahead of them. They left, and I was a 12-year-old lost kid in the mall with no parent. Luckily, one of the male school bullies saw me and was like, "Oi, nerd, what are you doing late?" And I just broke down crying. The kid just dropped the bullying and went, "Oi, oi, oi, what happened?" And according to my parents, I just blabbered everything and he told me to wait until he found a phone and paged my dad while calling his mum and telling her what happened. Needless to say, they got a frantic father going, "What the crap has happened?" And the girls said they told their mum that I saw my uncle and left with him. But to be honest, me and the bully became best of friends after that. My brother gave my phone number to some rando who proceeded to call me at all hours and threatened to commit the unspeakable act against me. Quality guys. In college, at the end of the year, a club I was in had a roast of the outgoing seniors. My friend running the roast couldn't come up with anything for one of the guys, who we'll call Ben. To drum up ideas, he called a bunch of Ben's close friends, also in the club, and asked them for things to make fun of Ben about. Thinking that this was a confidential conversation, they proceeded to absolutely lay into Ben. "Oh, that guy's seriously lame. Honestly, when I'm talking to a girl and he's there, it's supremely awkward." My friend simply recorded that whole conversation and played it outright for Ben's section of the roast, mortifying Ben and all of his friends simultaneously. In high school, someone made a pipe bomb and sneakily threw it into a metal trash can. One of my friends unknowingly walked by it when it exploded and blew out his eardrum. The trash can looked like a peeled banana afterwards. That person was ratted out and expelled. Killing a farmer's cow was some sick joke. The cow was not a meat cow either. It was the farmer's beloved pet, and he pet and fed it and played with the friendly cow each and every day. The kids forced the old bull to walk upstairs. Cows can walk upstairs, but their anatomy is not built for it, and it's extremely painful for them to do so. The old bull broke its front leg and bellowed in pain for 10 minutes. The farmer had no choice but to shoot it and kill his pet that he's had for the last 8 years right then and there on the stairs. The kids pled not guilty in court, but they were forced to pay for all of it. The bull was a Texas Longhorn, common in some areas but rare where we both lived. It was really sad to see the bull gone from the farm. I was neighbors with the farmer and he'd always invite me over to play with the animals and feed them and everything. The farmer sued the kids who killed the cow and won $70,000 and $20,000 for emotional upset. Stay winning, kings. The cow was an old bull. It was the most friendly cow I've ever seen. It wasn't even neutered, and it had really big horns and loved sitting next to the farmer and just grazing next to him. Oh, The thing here is that it's either a prank that goes too far, or if the bull had successfully gone up the stairs and didn't break its leg, what sort of prank was that? Just animal cruelty? What were these kids thinking? I mean, god damn it. The LeBrant family vloggers told their 5-year-old stepdaughter a few years ago that they were going to have to get rid of their dog because it wasn't behaving well around the baby as an April Fool's joke and posted it on YouTube. A friend of mine had a crush on his coworker. It was sort of an open secret. His manager tried to help him, offered advice, some things to say, small gifts she might be into, stuff like that. What no one knew at the time was that said manager and said coworker had recently started dating and hadn't told anyone yet. So he meant it as a prank on his new girlfriend, to be put into these awkward situations, but my friend's feelings were really hurt when it all came out. My ex-friend thought it was a really funny prank to kill my brother's hamster and tie it up and dress it in ridiculous ways. Any prank involving pretending to ask someone out on a date that I witnessed in my youth group. It was pretty common, everyone had it happen at least once, and it happened to me twice, but both times I found the guy repulsive and told them so. It happened to me. It was at my first school dance in middle school. I was always the shy kid, so I was surprised when one of the popular chicks came to me to ask me to dance. I said no because I was shy, but I was elated that I got asked. A few minutes later, I was in the bathroom stall, and a few kids came in and started talking about how they paid her $10 to ask me, and if I said yes, she would have just tripped me and made me look dumb. I never went to another dance all throughout middle and high school, even prom. What beautiful, weird hobbies are dying in the modern world. This might be a bit controversial, but since I do this, I'll mention it because that's how I feel. Playing drums. Real drums. MIDI are making us obsolete. Don't get me wrong, there are still applications for live drums, especially if you want the groove or feel of a live drummer, but bedroom music production has just skyrocketed even more due to the pandemic, and not everyone has enough space for a full acoustic kit. Ham radio. I remember as a kid listening to my dad's radio and him always having a good time and genuinely enjoying a good rag chew. I got my license and tuned in to some of the local repeaters. I found some nets with the most depressive things I've ever heard. People talking about their terminal illnesses or how prescription costs are killing them. I'm a coin collector and it is dying. My grandpa collected coins. He always told my brother and I that, "Someday this will all be yours. There's $80,000 worth of coins in there." Well, what a nightmare that was after he died. We learned Grandpa had been buying reproduction coins, repackaging them as collectible or authentic, rare, and then selling them back in the numismatic news for a profit. So anyone who had come to appraise the collection just wouldn't touch it. We finally got all of the counterfeit bullcrap out and the legit collectibles separated. And there were less than 10 grand worth of those. And even worse, my mother decided we had to share it with my cousins and aunt and uncle, even though the collection was promised to my brother and I as the first grandkids. So we got 1 grand apiece. Stamp collecting. It used to be a huge thing, but not anymore. Probably because of the rise of email. Very few people send letters anymore. They have them at estate sales all the time for super cheap. I have my grandfather's collection, and I don't have any strong feelings for them. Been trying to find a collector for a few years to give them to. No one around me wants them. Model rocketry. When I was a kid, we all built and glued and fired off model rockets with rocket engines and stuff. This comment made the smell of those rockets come right back to me, and now it makes me want to get back into it. I loved those as a kid. Postcard collecting. I buy a postcard of each place I visit. Some of the places in the world that I visited were very hard to find a postcard in. The hardest country, as we were only there for a day on a cruise, was Dominica. I'm surprised this hasn't come up yet, but china and crystal collections. Another one would be sterling silver, like tea sets, cutlery and stuff. Slot cars. The narrator loves slot cars, but generally once you've gone to the trouble of setting them up, the fun lasts for maybe 10 minutes. They're just weirdly nice to have and see around, but yeah, all of the enthusiasts do seem to be middle-aged or older. Model trains. There's a store in our town square that's been there for like 50 years that specializes in model trains. It's called a train and toy store, but there are almost no toys there. The store is interesting to walk around in if you're not claustrophobic, but he must not sell very much because he can't pay the rent anymore. He's closing and moving out of town to some building that he owns. Again, the stuff looks cool, but I've never seen anyone buy anything. I don't know, this sounds more like the death of brick-and-mortar retail than the death of that hobby itself. I'm not a model train enthusiast, but I took my son to a model train expo in 2019, and it seemed very alive and well as a hobby. That's just my experience, though. In the UK, it's 100% croquet. I know, what a cliché. When I was younger, everyone had a croquet set, and it was a great way to enjoy time with friends on a summer day in the garden. Whereas now, I don't know anyone that still owns one. Maybe a strange one, but this question did get me thinking about it. Geocaching, which is weird because I still do it sometimes while biking around, but caching apps rarely alert me or any of the finders in the apps now. I put $20 into what used to be a super popular cache that people would visit daily like 15 years ago. I later returned, about 6 months later, and the same items, including the $20, were still in there. I think a major reason is that the main platform, geocaching.com, started requiring payment for all but the most basic caches. I think this happened sometime in the early or mid-2010s. Pure money grab that is just killing the hobby. I remember when I first started geocaching, I was amazed at all the caches that I'd go and find right away. Nowadays, a newbie would be put off by having to pay for possibly the only caches that were already near them. Pen pals. As a teenager, I loved writing letters to new people and receiving letters from all over the country and the world. Everything is instant now, but nothing beats that feeling of getting a letter in the mail that's specifically for you, that's not a bill or circular, and comes from someone that genuinely wants to brighten your day. Coercion beanie babies. Collecting all 50 US state-minted quarters. I remember there used to be TV commercials selling you fancy cardboard with holes in them to help you collect them all. Oh, how times have changed. Yo, I had all 50 collected at one point, then one of my tweaker aunts stole them. Did it again, and then another desperate family stole the second collection. Collected them all one last time, my mom put it away for safekeeping, and then when we couldn't find it, we assumed someone else stole them. Building model airplanes. Model airplane buying, on the other hand, is alive and well. I mean, yeah, we've got all 300 plus kits in the attic, 15 in the same stage of construction, and 2 that we're actually working on, but god damn it, ClearProp has a new Sea Sprite and I've been looking for it, so I just ordered 3 from Hanant's. You know, wingsuit flying used to be really popular, but then many of them died and it quickly fell out of popularity. Slamming face first into a bridge at 90 miles per hour will really sour future people on trying, regardless of how cool the videos look. Flying kites. Never see that crap anymore. My girlfriend and I brought kites on a whim a few months ago. Hadn't flown a kite in probably 20 years, but we had fun. General aviation and being a private pilot. A series of lawsuits against plane manufacturers combined with insane certification requirements for airplanes and parts have made it so that buying new planes or replacement parts is ludicrously expensive for pretty much anyone earning less than $500K per year. Old, used aircraft from the heydays of the 60s and 80s had been filling the void to an extent over the years, but they're starting to get really worn out, and people feel less and less comfortable flying them as time goes on, and unfortunately there's just no replacements as they age out. As an example, a brand new Cessna 172 in 1969 cost about $12,500, which is about $90K in today's money. Today, a 2021 model would cost around $400,000. Indoor roller skating rinks. Skating has become popular, yes, but weirdly, the number of roller skating rinks seems to be going down. The 4 within 25 miles of me closed down over the last 15 years. I don't know any of the new ones, and I'm not sure where to go in New England to find an operating rink nowadays. Meanwhile, there's lots of private outdoor groups. It must just be too expensive to have the square footage to support a roller skating rink in an urban area. Flying radio-controlled helicopters and airplanes. Why would someone want to deal with all the hassle of flying a model helicopter that's insanely difficult to fly when they could just buy a DJI drone that has a first-person video stream, records video in 4K, and can fly around by itself via GPS? Yo-yo. Historical reenacting. People no longer want to play dress-up in itchy wool and educate folk on whatever period was their jam. Its heyday was the late 90s when you could just find a group that did just about any period you could imagine. I've got to say, at least in Northern Europe, the reenacting hobby seems to be very much alive and well, often intertwined with the LARP crowd, and I do feel like I know more than one American who does Civil War stuff as well. Bridge. Super complex game, has layers and layers of rules, and it's dead. Even growing up in the 80s, it had a reputation of being a game for groups of older ladies. Drag racing. The vehicular kind. A major trek in Georgia just got sold because of a local battery plant that's being built nearby, and the houses around it skyrocketed in value. Tatting lace. I've learned to needle tat and I would love to learn bobbin, but it's hard to find an eventual use for what you get out of it. Like, there's only so many bookmarks and doilies I can make for my IKEA box apartment, considering I can also crochet and knit. Still, it's a beautiful craft that I wish I could figure out how to use. Paintball. It's too expensive, unfortunately, and you need a good selection of people to play. The more players, typically the more diverse the skill range is. I think if it was a lot cheaper, there'd still be loads of players. On average, the routine player will buy 2 cases of paint, 2,000 rounds per case, and each of those will cost $40 to $65 US. Then they pay for entry and CO2, between $25 to $35, and then buy any other gear they might need or need to replace. Back when 2008 financial crisis happened, most fields I knew lost 3/4 of their serious players, and most of them never returned. Which really sucks because paintball was growing really fast until then. I'm not sure if it's a real hobby, but typewriting will die out eventually. The last typewriters factory closed some years ago. Years ago, I was in IT, and we had this guy who was about 80 years old who'd go office door to office door and ask each person if their typewriter needed service or repair. He had his cart with spare bits and ink reels and tools and nothing to repair. It was incredibly sad to see the disappointment once or twice a month when telling him no. There were maybe 5 typewriters across 20 floors and several thousand people. The company owner didn't have the heart to let him go. The owner died and his son immediately sold the company and many were laid off, including typewriter guy. That year for Christmas, while the sale was being completed, the son gave out copies of his book instead of bonuses. It was 90 pages, double-spaced, and large font. Teacher here. Hobbies in general are dying. Here's part of why. I regularly meet with parents who balk at the idea of their child doing something for fun. Unless it can translate to a career or college application, it's viewed as a waste of time and money. And if it can translate to one of those, then there's this crushing, constant pressure to be the best at it. We're raising a generation of children who can't comprehend hobbies. Based on young people I know, bowling, billiards, and poker are fading. Board games were experiencing a boom until COVID. D&D is super popular again, though. I don't know, board games are doing just fine. They might not be as visible anymore since people haven't been able to play out in public the past year, but people have been doing virtual sessions of the games or secret in-person games throughout the past year. The Kickstarter scene for board games never stopped, and now that in-person events are coming into fruition again, everyone's excited to bring out all the new games they haven't got to play in the last year. Model trains. The entire hobby is absolutely dead. Huge collections being sold for literal pennies on the dollar. An engine that used to cost $500 might not even sell for $5 now. Clubs. The Rotary Club, the Elks, the Masons, the League of Women Voters, all kinds of fraternal organizations. Beyond that, participation in all kinds of civic organizations, churches, labor unions, sports leagues, hobbyist clubs, they're way down from previous generations. Americans used to be world-renowned for their enthusiastic participation in clubs and civic organizations of all kinds. Now we're becoming an increasingly atomized society. The cost is that today, the average American has fewer close friends, is less likely to know their neighbors, and has less of an informal support network than at any point in history. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not strictly dying, but certainly becoming a bit more difficult. CD collecting. Right now, CDs are in this weird purgatory where we can't decide if we're done with them or not. They've fallen out of favor in terms of practical usage. Most people use streaming services, and many cars don't come with a CD player as standard. They're not totally obsolete, but they're nowhere near as popular as they once were. Many chain stores that specialize in entertainment products have also begun to scale back their stock, both in-store and online. Go to a CD section and browse popular, and for most artists, they'll stock a generic greatest hits collection, their latest release, and if you're really lucky, maybe some of their popular albums. Case in point, I wanted to add Rio by Duran Duran to my collection. It's one of the greatest albums of the 80s, and yet literally no chain stores in my area stocked it. You'd think that would be one that's in wide circulation, but apparently not. The other annoying thing is that they're not old enough to have garnered niche value yet. Vinyl is the new collector's trend, so there's loads of market stalls popping up selling vinyl as the in thing, but CD stalls at markets are dying. which is a shame because they were the guys to go to if you wanted to find rare albums. Golf. I read somewhere the other day that the average age of people golfing continues to rise every year. It's too expensive for younger generations, it's not very entertaining to watch unless you really enjoy golf, and it can go extremely long. I'm a young guy who loves playing golf, but goddamn, it's a waste of land and water. Granted, a lot of people these days simply don't have time for hobbies. I feel like the ones who do are indoor things now. For example, video games, writing, card collecting. I know a few people who do calligraphy, so there are still hobbies, it's just quiet stuff. Does it take money? Well, it's dying. Hobbies aren't dying because people aren't interested in them. Hobbies are dying because no one can afford hobbies with the current state of the economy. Hobbies are dying as hobbies. I feel like everything has to be a side hustle now, and people don't just do crap for fun anymore. I don't know that that's true in my part of the world, and I say that as a former unpaid thespian who's now a freelance YouTuber, so sure, that became a hustle. But I have a few major hobbies now, all of which have thriving communities. Can't believe I haven't seen this yet, but film photography. Used to be, with a bit of work, you could make a passable darkroom in a closet or your basement and develop your own film. The ease of digital photography was the first nail in that coffin in the late 90s and early 2000s, but it lingered on for a while as the quality of digital sensors just wasn't there yet. Now, digital DSLR has gotten to the point that it's all but killed anything short of the most hardcore film enthusiasts. There are many out there that will argue film still exceeds digital in some metrics, but regardless of those points, the industry and hobby have essentially collapsed. Those disagreeing are simply working on a different timescale. My entire family was a Rochester Kodak family, 4 generations of employment in film. From that perspective, film is dying. It's a minuscule fraction of what it once was. That the cost of film cameras is going up is a natural consequence of the supply of film cameras dwindling as parts and camera themselves dry up. 58 Corvettes cost more than they did in 1958, and I guarantee you that's not because they have more customers they did back then. Simply a ratio of demand to lesser supply and collector's status. I suspect many of you are much younger and don't quite understand how prolific film was in the mid-90s and earlier. Anyone could set up shop in their basement without too much work, from the high school photo students to Inga and Hans making their amateur adult films. To drive this point further home, I'm a career and technical education or CTE teacher. Film photography used to qualify for CTE funding at the federal level. In order to qualify for this, there must be demonstrable career opportunities in film photography as measured by the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. With the change to Perkins v. legislation, film photography is no longer qualifying for CTE funding for the first time since it started receiving funding several decades ago. This is indicative that the BLS has measured sustained downward trends year on year for multiple years, which in turn means there's not a viable economic pathway to sustain hobbyists, such that the feds won't fund any students attempting to enter that career field. Don't get me wrong, I think it's lovely if you enjoy it as a hobby. It's a great art form. I had a darkroom in my basement as a kid. Someone might be starting a new mom-and-pop shop, but that pales in comparison to the thousands that have closed. Nikon might be making some film cameras, but that's nothing compared to the monoliths or duoliths that were Kodak and Fujifilm. Particularly now that the final contracts for film radiography and film videography at Kodak have expired, they're clinging for dear life to any whisper of profit that they can. Working on your own car. I'm talking engine, clutches, and bodywork. Wiffle ball. Used to be that every boy from 8 to 13 had one. Baseball in general seems to be falling out of favor as a youth sport. I don't know if it's falling off on the pro level of attendance or viewership-wise, but anecdotally, our kids are getting to organized sports playing age, and we don't know anyone signing their kids up for Little League. Baseball was hype when I was a kid too. Between multiple MLB expansion teams, I was in the Marlins' backyard, and kid-marketed movies like Sandlot, Rookie of the Year, and Angels in the Outfield, it felt like everyone I knew was playing it for at least a couple of years. Sport card collecting conventions used to be a huge thing. Now maybe a few grey hairs get together to trade, buy and sell. Model trains, who has the space or time anymore? And building theremins at home. Ceramics. There used to be 2 or 3 shops in every small town, where you could go, pick a piece, clean it, they'd fire it for you, then come back a week later and paint it. They'd fire it for you again. Then you'd go and pick up your finished masterpiece. It was so refreshing. I'm 24. When I was a kid, there was one pottery place across the street. I always wondered what it was, but never went in. I can't remember when they closed, maybe 15 years ago?
They still have all of the ceramic pieces from in the window on display. It looks like it's stuck in the past.
I don't know if it's dying in popularity, but beekeeping has definitely undergone a shift in my lifetime. It used to be that every farm you drove past had a small hive or two tucked away somewhere. It was a side crop in the many crops that were grown. Now it's got a pretty large initial investment cost, and you see more beekeepers that are young people with a garden in their backyard. It's expensive and time-consuming and frequently puzzling. It's also occasionally painful and sometimes heartbreaking. I still love it though. Tuner cars. Yes, the community does still exist, but the days of throwing a cold air intake and some springs on your Civic are long gone, and it's only for people with deep pockets now. It doesn't help that the supply of affordable, lightweight, entry-level performance cars is basically zero now, and the ones left over from the 90s and early noughties are so supply-constrained you need to be able to produce at least $10,000 in cash just to buy one anymore. Never mind the cost of parts has gone up substantially too. I'm holding out hope that the first-generation BRZ or FRS 86 ends up bringing it back somewhat, but they're not cheap enough. They're still around $15,000 for something with 80,000 miles on it. And they're not produced in large enough numbers either. Scrapbooking. Nobody prints pictures anymore. Ventriloquism. In my opinion, this one can stay away. Yeah, as much as the narrator feels that all art is valid, the people and their talking dolls, while impressive, were also slightly creepy. But it's sad that they're going away. It's legitimately a magic skill to me. Basically, everything the news says that millennials killed.
AKA the industry failed to adapt to the free market and it's trying to blame its customers for the fact that it sucks.
Collecting spoons. I'm a teenager, yet I often enjoy finding spoons at cool tourist attractions. My personal favorite is one I got from Prague during Christmas time. It has revolving dice in the handle. I live in Northern California wine country, about 60 miles north of San Francisco, and around here, it's golf. Even though we have a huge footprint of retired people, all of the local golf courses are slowly going under. It might be because a loop is like $120 during the week and $200 on a weekend. Recreational fentanyl use. Most people are answering with hobbies that have a very low influx of new hobbyists, and others are disproving them by showing how much money is still being traded hands in that hobby, which is to be expected when you're talking about a hobby where the most participants are boomers and Gen Xers with more disposable income than us. Prank calls are a dying art form. Pretty soon, kids won't even get it.
Nobody picks up their phone for a number they don't recognize.
Comic book stores have basically had to load the store up with trading cards, Funko Pops, and tchotchkes to survive, while the actual comic books get cast into a small corner. The Marvel and DC movies might make billions, but it's done zero to increase interest in the comics themselves. DIY wood projects. I was going to build new 23-inch raised beds for my garden this year, but when an 8-foot 2x12 costs $60, my hobby needs professional financing. Square dancing is quite literally dying. Average age of any tip is about 65 or older. Good callers are a rarity. Actually playing trading card games and not just investing in the most hyped set.
Swing dancing got really popular for a while in the late 90s. Haven't heard much about that in a long time.
Barbershop quartetting. For as long as I've been in the society, the membership prices and convention registrations have always been way too expensive for something you don't even need an instrument for, and there aren't as many conventions a year as I think there should be because it's probably just too hard to justify the administrative costs. There's a ton of us, just not enough to make the scene really shine outside of the really big events. What's the worst way you've seen someone get rejected? I always remember an incident when I was around 11. I was picked to go on the summer camp kind of trip for a week with a bunch of kids the year above me. They were 12 and 13-year-olds. This was because of my good behavior. I was the only 11-year-old. There was a boy I'd had a crush on for a while, and on the first day he asked me to be his girlfriend. Obviously, we were all children, so that doesn't even mean anything. But he kept going for the whole week, sending me notes, hugging me in the hall before we were sent to our separate dorms, and then on our last night I got a note asking me to meet him in the hall. When I went out, the entire group was there, like 35 to 40 kids, all crying with laughter. He announced to everyone it had been an entire joke that the whole group had been in on, and he had never been interested in an ugly teacher's pet like me. As an adult, I'm obviously not remotely upset about the romantic rejection, because I was 11. But the social rejection and the public humiliation aspect was tough.
Anyway, I'm 24 now and he slid into my DMs after high school and I told him to go F himself, which felt good. This happened in the 6th grade. I was bullied badly throughout elementary school. For reasons I still don't understand, I was made a social outcast by the mean girls. I was walking home from school with one of the cool boys in class who was always nice to me one-on-one, but eagerly joined the bullying otherwise. He told me that one of the girls in class was having a party after school and that I should come. I was so excited to be invited to a party with the cool kids. I went home, told my mum, and rode my bike to the girl's house. I rang the doorbell and the whole group answered. One of them said, "Oh my god, she actually came," and they all laughed. Then the girl whose house it was said, "You can go now," and shut the door in my face. I was too ashamed to go back home and tell my mum what had happened, so I rode my bike around aimlessly, crying, for a couple of hours before going home. I'm 35 years old now, and that memory still stings. I'm so grateful that I had a loving home life and social media wasn't around yet. I don't know if I would have made it through otherwise. Don't be bullies, kids. I was having a party for my 13th birthday. I sent my crush an invite. A week after giving them out, I found a bit of torn paper on the school field. I recognized the color and pattern, then looked up, and there was the rest of it, torn into tiny pieces. The kind of tearing that takes time and effort to get it into that many. 10 out of 10 would not be a teenage girl again. I went out for lunch with the dude I had a crush on. I told him I liked him, and he said, "Are you aware of the concept of the friend zone? My friends and I have laughed about this for years." I thought the friend zone was something that people imagined they were in as a weird coping mechanism to being rejected, not a thing that we actively sales pitched people into being in. Hilarious. When I was 11, the boy I was crushing on said he didn't want to go out with me because I was ugly in front of all of my friends. We ended up getting together in our late teens and we've now been together for 13 years. He doesn't remember this incident, but he's devastated that he ever said this to me, even as a child. I think that's a reminder of how saying something hurtful to someone like that will stick with the person you said it to for a long time, but the person who said it forgets it with no problem. It's not exactly a rejection, but it was me being completely oblivious and optimistic because a cute boy was nice to me. I met a guy at a club meeting in college who I thought was pretty cute. He invited me to hang out a couple of times to do homework or grab breakfast together in the dining hall and seemed into me, compliments and lots of eye contact, and he listened to me when I talked, but never made a physical move. But we were both 18-year-old virgins meeting in public places, so it wasn't unreasonable to assume he was just shy, because I certainly was. After a while, he invited me to go see a movie, so I figured that this was like a date, right? I met up with him at the movie theater, and it turned out he was going with a group of people, and it wasn't just the two of us. That should have been a signal, but nope. I spent the first half of the movie trying to snuggle up to him, hold his arm or his hand, to be cute, and I finally started to realize that he was super not into it when I rested my hand on his knee and he picked it up and returned it to my lap. We got out of the theater and he turned to me in front of everyone and said, "You know I'm gay, right?" If the ground could have opened up and swallowed me whole at that moment, I would have welcomed it. I felt awful that I'd spent an hour or so trying to snuggle up with someone who was uncomfortable and too polite to tell me to back off, and I still cringe to think about it now. I got sat down for coffee with my boyfriend of 2 years, and he said, "I'm bored of you now, let's break up," then picked up his coffee and left. It tore at me for a while, but I got over it. I'm more angry than anything that he wasted my time. How the frick can people do this to people they've been in relationships with? And long ones. Romantic relationships are so damn scary. I don't want to spend years with someone only for them to easily toss me away. After living with my boyfriend, now ex, for a couple of years, I was going through a bit of a depression. Things started to look up and I was starting to put my life back together. We'd only done the deed a few times in as many months, and he mentioned that when I was ready, he'd like me to initiate. He didn't want to pressure me. Great, he's been super understanding so far, and this just shows how supportive he is. The next day I try to initiate because I have a cool, understanding, supportive boyfriend that I love. He stops me and says, "Don't you want to lose some weight first? I don't want you to be upset if I can't get hard because of your belly flab." Noped out of that relationship real quick. Honestly, it was just absurd enough that I kind of laughed it off and I didn't take it personally. This story is from last year and probably still counts as my most painful and confusing rejection. I'd known a man for several years online and we'd gotten very close. We'd met on World of Warcraft and we played together literally every day for 2 years, talking on Discord, and eventually we started flirting a bit. He was begging me to come visit him, as he lives across the country, unfortunately, and I enthusiastically said yes, because at this point I'm stupidly in love. He spends months going on and on about his feelings for me, how he's always liked me and how he's in love, how I'm so beautiful and he can't wait to kiss me, all that stuff. At this point, he's video chatted with me multiple times and seen many full body pictures of me, so he definitely knows what I look like, which brings me to the weird part. We finally meet, and he treats me like a sister, and seems really uncomfortable with the idea of kissing all of a sudden. The trip was very fun, but I felt very rejected. I tried hugging him when we got back to his place, and he was visibly uncomfortable, telling me that he wasn't ready to make a physical move, despite him being the one begging me to come to be with him. I felt really rejected and repulsive, and he even sat on a different couch from me across the room, despite telling me how much he wanted to cuddle for 2 years. Late that night, I asked him what was up, and he said that he found our age difference off-putting, which really upset me because he knew my age since the day we met, and he's not even that much older than me. It really felt like a lame excuse. To this day, I have no idea what really happened. My only 2 guesses are that I look fatter in person than he was expecting, or that he had an actual girlfriend somewhere else. I'm still salty about the waste of my time and money. I got ghosted by a guy that I'd been seeing for a year. I saw him at a bar a few months later, and he tried to come over and greet me like nothing had happened, but I stuck my hand in his face and walked away. Maybe not the most grown-up thing to do, but he ghosted me, so screw him. Lost my virginity to my boyfriend at the time. 2 days later, he dumped me via text. The whole, "it's not you, it's me" thing. To a freshly 18-year-old girl, though, that obviously meant nothing. There was a happy ending, though. After that, I vowed to never do the deed with someone I couldn't see myself marrying ever again. That's just a personal choice for myself. I have no issue at all with people doing it casually. It just wasn't something I wanted. Sure enough, a year and a half later, at 19 years old, I met a guy that seemed to check all the boxes. I moved forward, deciding that even if we didn't end up married, it was worth it because he showed me how I wanted to be loved by someone. We've been together for 7 years, married for almost 5. A guy told me he only dared to talk to me because I was the ugliest girl in the room. I mean, that's a play, a really crappy play that hopefully never works for anyone who uses it, but what the heck do I know? I've never met someone who's used negging who wasn't also a garbage human being, to be honest. When I was about 14, a new kid came to our school and I made quick friends with him. We played Xbox Live a lot. I developed a quick crush. He texted me to get on live because he needed to tell me something. "Hey, I wanted to tell you that I really like you." I was excited, but pretty sure it was a joke. "Are you messing with me? I really like you, it's not a joke." So I believed him. "Chrissy, will you go out with me?" And I said yes. "April Fools, I'd never go out with you." And then he laughed for a good few minutes. I left the call and was really hurt. He continued to bully me for a few years after that, telling me to self-delete and that I was ugly, and that nobody liked me. He moved away before senior year, and I got to actually enjoy it without getting bullied. In 4th grade, my boyfriend broke up with me by slamming a basketball in my face on the crowded playground. Worst period of my life. I'd literally just gotten out of an awful relationship that involved several instances of the unspeakable act, as well as physical attacks. I had rampant PTSD, I knew it, and was foolishly trying to fill the void with alcohol and other people. I met someone on Tinder. He was a medical student and really smart, funny, handsome, and nice to me. I was wary about getting used or hurt again, so I made it my policy not to meet anyone in person that I hadn't spent some time talking to. We texted pretty much non-stop for weeks. I even opened up about my mental health, and he was seemingly kind and responsive. We planned a date. The night before we'd planned to go out, he was in the area and invited himself over to my apartment. I insisted that he not come because, as I said, my mental health wasn't in a great place, and my apartment was in a pretty rough shape. But he insisted it was fine, that he didn't mind, that he accepted me and just wanted to spend a bit of time with me. So I had him come by. We talked for a bit, and he started kissing me. One thing led to another, and I don't know, I didn't feel ready for it, but I didn't feel that was important. We ended up doing the deed. It was a nice night, I guess. We talked about our plans for the next night, and it was implied that he was into me and that we'd be seeing each other again. There was no indication whatsoever that anything was wrong on his part. Then he left in the morning. Again, we'd been texting non-stop, and then it just slowed to a halt. He blew off our date. A couple of days later, I asked him what was up, and he essentially said that I was too messy for him and that it had put him off. Then I never heard from him again. Really felt like there was something between us. I'd basically let him earn my trust, and then he bolted once he got the notch in his belt. That really frickin' hurt. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This is the reverse story. When I was 15, a guy at school asked me out on a date. I assumed he was making fun of me, so I didn't say anything and just walked away. I was pretty proud of my response at that time, considering I usually said something awkward or made things worse when people made fun of me. It didn't occur to me until years later that he might have been serious. I was talking to a guy for a while and finally felt comfortable enough to send him a more risque photo. I didn't send out any fully undressed photos or anything, but I liked this guy, so I gave him something. I sent the photo and he replied back with, got anything better to impress me? His reasoning when I pressed him was, well, you're just so hot. I just wanted you to send more pictures. Nope, I stopped talking to him shortly after. After 22 years of marriage, he said he didn't want to be married anymore. What that translated to was, I am effing your friend. When I was like 11, I used to go to these social dance things with my friends. It wasn't really my deal. I've always been introverted, so they insisted I go. I remember my friends pushing me to ask this guy to dance. I didn't want to, and then he came and asked me. So I said okay. After that night, my friends said it was on a dare, and the dude and his friends came over throughout the night to tell me that I was ugly. So yeah, not really a rejection, but probably one of the worst things that's happened to me regarding the opposite gender. There was a really cute redhead cop or sheriff who used to come into the same gym as me and just walk on the treadmill for 3 to 5 miles every single day. I'd talked to her a few times and she seemed friendly enough, smart too, so I kept talking to her. No real intentions of asking her out, but I did enjoy our banter. Then came this fateful Monday evening. As I was wrapping up my workout and she's walking her 500 miles, just to walk 500 miles, I stopped in for a quick chat. It starts off innocently enough, but pretty quickly she starts spewing some nonsense about leagues and the audacity of certain guys to approach her, and if I'm, referring to me, the best she can do, she's just going to give up on dating altogether. I walked away without saying a word, but she followed me out with some final advice of, I guess you shouldn't talk to me on a Monday, huh? I followed that sage advice, which worked so well I've extended it to the rest of the week. Haha, my god. Well, there's not liking unsolicited approaches from strangers, and then there's insulting them when they come up and telling them that they're hideously ugly. I'd say that's going a bit far in the majority of cases. One ex told me he was done now and just wanted to see what it was like dating a black woman. My last ex was a weird roller coaster. He was heavily Christian, outspoken, and pretty haughty about it too, and it came out that he had told me that he has an addiction for all things in the bedroom. Then he said he was getting therapy for it. Then he said he'd been on special interest sites, sending messages and pictures to girls in other states for the duration of our time together. 3 years. After all that, no. Just no. Then almost a year later, homie is seen at a local special bedroom interest event. So I guess therapy's going great. On my books for the oddest breakup I've had, and I'm nearing 30. I think it was freshman year in high school. I just spent the summer in Switzerland, where I'd had the most amazing summer romance with this gorgeous Swiss boy named Bastian. This was the boost I needed to think I might finally be popular and get attention from cute boys at home. There was this boy Jason I'd had a crush on forever, so I just talked to him one day. He was distant, but I kept trying. Then I guess he got sick of me, and he had 2 of his friends find me at my gymnastics gym of all places, and as I was sweaty, exhausted from practice and wearing a leotard, which always made me feel a little conspicuous, they said something like, just so you know, Jason will never be interested in a girl with a small chest and a retard for a brother. And then they laughed as they walked away. My brother has extreme autism, so I'd heard cruel comments before, but it just crushed me. Jason actually saw me at college 5 to 6 years later and apologized. I guess he felt bad about it for years. Oh, this one that happened at 11 years old, definitely. I was asked out on a camp by a boy I liked, and I was nervous to hold his hand. He broke up with me literally 20 minutes later because I was nervous. You're not the kind of girl I want to date. Being around you is emotionally exhausting. You radiate negative energy. I was 23, and to be fair, I was really depressed at the time, but geez, my dude. I dated a woman for a year, then she got a job offer and moved across the country to California for work and begged me to come with her. I loved her, so I did. Then she was there for 3 months while I was looking for a job and getting my life sorted to come with. I visited for 2 weeks during this time to be with her, find a place, and interview. The visit was amazing and we talked and video chatted every day I was back in Florida. She was pretty homesick and was having trouble acclimating to everything, but was really looking forward to when I could just be there with her. I landed a job via phone interview and we both celebrated. Early January, I'm packing the truck and getting ready for a cross-country drive, leaving my siblings and parents, all of whom I'm very close with, and then I noticed she sounded weird on the phone. She's being short on the video calls, but I chalk it up to her not being happy since she says she's fine. So I'm stressing, trying to get there to help out. One day into my drive, I was talking to her before bed and she didn't say I love you too like she normally would. I ask her what's going on and she tells me we'll talk when I get there. So now I have days of mindless interstate desert driving to think about what could be going on and what's changed. She's not giving any details, being very short on the phone and refusing to video chat. I'm barely sleeping at night from the stress while also driving 18 hours a day to try and get there as fast as I can. I arrive to sign my apartment lease, half move in, shower, and go to see her since she's now done with work. She's a live-in nanny, so I couldn't move in with her. I knock, she opens the door, and from the look on her face, I know what I've been afraid of for days is true. Our relationship is over. She explains to me over the next week that she's homesick, she's originally from Brazil, and that she wants to go back there to be with her family. Then it comes that she started talking with her ex and is planning on getting back together with him on her return. I'm barely processing my emotions at this point, and just trying to change her mind by spending time together. She has a flight with plans to leave. I get 1 week before she leaves the country. We spend our time together, getting along like we always did, still big chemistry, and we're enjoying ourselves, until I'm reminded she's still leaving. 1 week passes, I drive her to the airport, and she flew out of my life, leaving me thousands of miles from anyone I cared about. I was deeply depressed. I stayed for the duration of my 6-month lease, doing nothing but work, eat, sleep, and repeat. Then I drove back to Florida. In short, I planned for months, changed jobs, and moved thousands of miles to be with someone, and they left after a week. When I was about 17, I went to the park on a double date with a good friend of mine and 2 guys we'd just met. We'd been there for about 10 minutes when dude 1 suddenly shouts, "I'll bet you $10 I can run through those trees and back in 60 seconds," and he just takes off into the forest. After a few minutes, dude number 2 decides his friend must have gotten lost, runs to his car and just drives away. We never saw or heard from either of those guys again. It was a very strange experience because these guys pursued us, and we're still not sure what made them run for the hills after spending just 10 minutes alone with us. This certainly takes the prize for the strangest answer here. Honestly, I was just relieved to get a breather from people being more awful. I was in love with someone, and I sent him undressed photos because he asked me to. But the last one I sent, looking back, wasn't very flattering, so from then on, he ghosted me. It really broke my heart, like I really thought we could pursue a relationship, and I showed him the most intimate parts of me. I'm a 6'4" female, and it's hard for people to look past my height. I was single for a long time, so I was on Tinder and other sites, and I always had to give people a warning before I met them in person. Tall guys are fine, but apparently tall girls scare people. I've talked to people for weeks and then met up with them, and I can see the shock in their faces, but everything goes really well, and afterwards they just end up ghosting me or block me. It's really disheartening. Tall guys usually like short girls, so a lot of the people I was meeting up with were shorter guys. Not always that much shorter than me, but apparently they still had issues with it. I even had someone tell me if I wasn't so tall, I would have been the perfect girlfriend, but they can't deal with the height. I could only take so many of these rejections before it started to really get to my head, so I was done with all that. It's crazy that it's something that I have absolutely no control over. I dated a girl in high school for almost 6 months, and we both lost our virginity to each other. We lived like a 2-minute walk from each other's houses, so we'd hang out every day at her house since her parents were never home. We'd never really talked at school unless it was just a passing comment. One day I went and tried to talk to her and her friends, and she acted like she didn't know me. I got upset and mentioned that we'd been dating for almost 6 months, and she said it was all in my head and that she didn't know who I was. Later that day, I was supposed to go to her house. She texted me asking where I was and called me crying because I didn't show up. I broke up with her that day.
What moronic, empty gestures has your job made for the benefit of the employees? Today, my employer held a catered leadership conference for managers only, aiming to improve employee morale. Essentially, the managers were all brought into the conference room, played team-building games, and had breakfast and lunch catered for them. This is because it was noticed that general employee morale was low and there was a high turnaround for the entry-level worker. What actually happened was most employees had to skip lunch, work overtime, and take on many extra tasks in order to make up for all the absent managers. This made the entire staff bitter and created an us versus them attitude in the workplace. Wait, you have managers who actually do stuff? To the point where you have to work harder to make up for their absence? Man, must be nice. Our company created a Facebook page and sent out an email with the link to everyone's work accounts, advertising it and asking everyone to like them on Facebook. Facebook is blocked at my work, by the way. Mine is doing the same. They want us to promote a product and even set up a game with links to Facebook and Twitter. I guess they expect you to participate from home or something. I just might win a free water bottle, fingers crossed. Ugh. My old company was having a morale problem. Me and my workers had been pulling serious overtime trying to get all of the work done. For 2 weeks straight, we'd essentially come in at 7:30 a.m. and left at 6:30 p.m. without taking lunch. Finally, after we'd started openly talking about how angry we were that we were doing these hours and were still getting complained at for making tiny errors here and there, they decided to reward our department with lunch. When our lunch hour came, the 4 of us walked in to find all the food had been eaten by the managers, and they'd left us 2 egg rolls and a handful of fried rice. Morale had never been higher. In my place of work, we've gotten extremely busy in the last few months. They expanded their stores into Florida. Instead of giving the employees much needed or deserved raises, we got oranges. Yep, oranges. They thought they were being clever being in Florida and all. Just made me angry. Creating an on-the-second policy. You have to be at your desk exactly the second your workday begins. This has created an atmosphere where they find it really hard to get anyone to do anything extra. On the second the workday ends, everyone leaves. Before, we didn't care about a minute or two here and there. Yeah, I've never heard of this policy being implemented without this predictable and warranted result. Turns out most people will work pretty well on a task-based workload and resent being policed at all times. I used to work in catering as a chef, and we once catered a company-wide going-away party for the head of a large local company that makes exercise equipment. The reason that the company head was leaving was to go on a Mormon mission, but that's neither here nor there. The executives ate on a dais at the head of a large conference room, elevated a few feet above the ground. They ate smoked beef tenderloin with a Calvados demi-glace, haricot vert, roast new potatoes, Caesar salad, and all manner of breads and rolls, with handmade chocolate mousse in a champagne glass for dessert. The employees, on the other hand, were left to mill about on the conference room floor and enjoy their fully catered meal of donuts. Yep, they got to eat crappy store-bought donuts and watch their bosses and managers enjoy a multi-course, fully catered meal in full view of the masses of peons. That was close to 10 years ago, and it still leaves a bad taste in my mouth. My company has an annual trip for people voted as MVP from each office location, plus executives and salespeople who make quota. The trips are usually very fancy, all expenses paid affairs with tons of swag. Cut to the height of the Great Recession. We have our quarterly town hall meeting. The CEO stands there in front of a screen, showcasing photos from this trip. I'm talking about pictures of people receiving fancy watches and going on helicopter rides. Whilst these photos are showing, he gives a speech about tightening our belts, no raises that year, and all salaried employees having to take 2 weeks off without pay. This is with pictures of him and all the other execs in the background, drinking champagne on a helicopter behind him. People were angry to say the least. Our company decided to give out a weekly prize to randomly selected employees as a way to boost morale. The winner's name, title, and prize was emailed to everyone in the company. Some of these prizes were things like iPads and TVs, so at first, this seemed cool. Then we started realizing that the people who won the big prizes were all VPs and above. Lower-level employees won things like a tote bag full of promotional materials. Now, whenever a regular person wins, he or she gets a flood of congratulatory emails from bemused coworkers. Congrats on winning that plastic cup, John. You must be so proud. In order to improve morale, my previous employer set up a suggestion box. When people anonymously submitted their gripes, management got frustrated and said we had to put our names on our suggestions. What's the point of a suggestion box if it's not anonymous? If I'm going to put my name on it, I'll just email you directly. I don't suppose it was for the benefits of the employees, but I worked at a stationery store that sold DVDs, CDs, and the like, W.H. Smith. They had a management meeting about security and shoplifting. So, already short-staffed, the supervisors, managers, and security guards spent 2 hours upstairs nattering. Worst day for shoplifting the store had ever had. Hilarious. I was knocked back from an internship at a world-leading insurance company last year because when you showed up, you looked a bit like an IT guy. Considering I was applying for an IT internship and my technical background is IT, I have no idea what this human resources goon was expecting.
HR is terrible. When I was hiring here, my interviewer basically gave me tips to lie to HR to make it easier for myself. This was my bonehead move. I was new to managing in the taxi world and thought, hey, let's throw a barbecue and get to know everyone. Turns out a lot of Muslims are taxi drivers and that Ramadan is kind of a big deal. Well, now I throw what I call a halal BQ a few days before Ramadan starts. It's pretty nice. When I worked at McDonald's, there was a month where they put a digital scale by the shake machine. We had to zero out the weight of a cone each time and make sure that every customer was getting exactly 5 ounces of ice cream. A cone with too much got thrown out. It's hard to appreciate the difficulty of making a cone, let alone a perfect one. This just ended up being a massive waste of time and money. Congratulations, you've won a dinner with your boss. Ugh. I actually wouldn't mind that, depending on the boss. If you've got a good boss, it would be a good opportunity to voice some concerns. If you've got a bad boss, it's a good chance to become buddies, since lousy bosses always seem to favor their friends over others. I work in the back room of a large retail store. We're understaffed with hours cut and the only section of the store to run independently after 3:30. We have one supervisor. Yet we have the highest rank in the nation in terms of speed and accuracy. We still get called lazy by the higher-ups. Our grocery and pharmacy outlet was involved in a company-wide push to boost profits over the holiday season. If we came out on top with the greatest percentage increase over all other outlets, then we'd receive a handsome Christmas bonus. We came out on top, but the only ones to reap rewards were upper management. Among the 30-plus employees, we would have stood to make nearly $1,000 apiece for our hard work during the holidays. Instead, management split it amongst the top 3, giving them a little under $10K each. Those who complained were fired and given crap excuses why. I don't work for that crap company anymore, nor do I ever have to see the greedy management that kept me and my family from my rightful Christmas bonus. Screw them. We think it's in your best interest to not know how much the company pays of your insurance premium. Turned out it was 0%. A motivational speech was given to some of our assembly guys, and 2 of their managers were trying to get them to see the importance of working hard as a team. Here's what they had to say. Just think about slave ships. If everyone didn't keep rowing through the storm, the boat would capsize and they'd all drown. I mean, as moronic as these guys are, I appreciate how forthright they are with their view of the employees. Now you know that you can treat the job with the same enthusiasm as someone being neither paid nor treated well. My wife is always flabbergasted at the crap my company wastes money on. The lamest was wooden back scratchers with the company logo on them that they handed out to everyone. I used to work at a movie theater as a supervisor and later a projectionist. While we were making the transition to digital projectors, we were informed that we'd be keeping 1 or 2 of the old film projectors in case one of the movies we were showing wasn't available in a digital format. They told us they were going to keep us on, but gave us extra duties to justify the 80% reduction in workload. It seemed fair. Fast forward a few weeks and we got the heads up that they wanted us to train a couple of managers on how to thread up a film projector and start it. They then had a giant appreciation party for us at a local go-kart track, where at the end they told us that the managers were all going to be handling the projection equipment from then on. They then offered us jobs as part-time regular employees, starting at minimum wage, with an adjustment based on other merit raises we'd been given. I would have gone from 40 hours a week at $13 an hour to 25 hours a week at $8.75. On the last go-kart race, I ran the general manager into a wall at 30 miles per hour. At my firm, we used to have the CEO that felt really entitled and was just a huge jerk. The company HQ was in a 3-story building with 2 stairways, one on each end of the building. His office was next to the stairway entrance on one end of the building. For some reason, he believed this was an executive staircase and only he was allowed to use it. Whenever he found another employee in it, he'd yell at them and threaten to write them up. So, all employees had to use the other stairway regardless of where their office was in the building. It was such a huge inconvenience. Well, we all had the last laugh. He went on this great vacation to Europe, and little did he know that while he was gone, the board of directors had fired him. His company vehicle was removed from his property, his access to company networks was revoked, his keycards were deactivated, and his office was packed up and placed outside the building the morning he arrived. He was truly blindsided. He came in claiming his car was stolen only to see it parked in front ready for the next CEO. Karma. I work at a theater, and we were pushed to sell these membership cards to 2% of our guests. At the end of the year, we ended up being one of the few theaters that ended up doing it. So instead of giving everyone their bonuses or raises or even a thank you party, the GM got to fly all the way to California and Las Vegas. We also hadn't had anyone internally promoted within the last year or so. The last 2 positions that were open were filled from the outside. Needless to say, everyone was really mad. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Our VP's speech at the annual employee meeting. Now, we're all about work-life balance here, but we have to work harder and longer. Mental fricking pygmy. You know, it seems like most of these companies' plans was to unite them around a common enemy, the managers. Every year, my hotel holds a staff party at which door prizes are given away. Our main competitor had theirs the week before, and staff with friends and spouses at that hotel reported back to us about the party's door prizes. iPhones, iPads, mini fridges filled with beer or groceries, the grand prize being a week for 4 at any hotel in their chain, including airfare and meals. Then our party came and my company's crapulence was revealed. All the door prizes were free 3 nights at specific hotels in our chain, no airfare, nothing else. Crappy hotels in non-destination cities and towns. 3 free nights in a hotel you had no desire to see in a city you had 0 reason to visit, and the prize winner had to cover their own airfare into the bargain. Staff morale plunged to an all-time low when 1 month later the managers all had their weekend advance on a 4-day weekend at a nearby 5-star resort, all expenses covered including golf and sailing. When Circuit City was still around, I was a warehouse manager. The company was struggling from spending too much on planograms and such. So, what did they do? They spent tens of millions developing a new POS system called our POS, which we lovingly called our piece of excrement. I actually worked in the test store that was the first to get it in the nation. We had the dev team in for months working out kinks that we'd find and whatnot, and I discovered a pretty major flaw. The system would just randomly lose items in inventory, like $4,000 TVs on a daily basis. I told them about this all the time and they said they'd reevaluate or something. They didn't believe me and it had to be human error. So, when the next distribution truck came in, we took complete inventory before accepting the shipment into our POS. And wouldn't you know it, we were immediately missing 25 grand in merch. So, what did they do? They never fixed it, pushed it out to stores, and subsequently went bankrupt. And the old system wasn't even bad. Sure, it was dated, but once you knew the way around, it was gold. My workplace has yearly mandatory barbecues. They call them meetings. The meeting lasts for about 20 minutes and the rest is barbecue and pool and stuff. Sounds awesome, but it is mandatory that you show up and it is mandatory that you bring some food. You will be written up and or fired if you don't. So they scheduled this year's barbecue meetup in the middle of the day on a day I already never work because I go to school. I kept telling them I couldn't miss a day. I'm in a really competitive program. As in 200 people trying to get into an 18-slot program, so I absolutely can't mess up. My bosses said if I didn't show up, I'd get fired. So, I didn't show up. I actually forgot. I was just going to show up late originally. Then no one said anything and no Fs were given. I saw the photos on Facebook and it just seemed really lame. All the stupid cliques were there, same old bullcrap, just outside of work, not getting paid for it. And I'm sure that at each barbecue they ask, "Why is nobody having fun? I specifically requested it." I don't get it. Surely these managers have their own social lives that they have to sacrifice in order to hold these things? How are they not as annoyed about them as you are? I'm not even joking. I was deployed in middle-of-nowhere Afghanistan in 2002, and my jerk colonel tripped over a rock walking from the command tent to the latrine at night. 30 minutes later, me and the other lowest-ranking airmen were outside picking up rocks with flashlights near the perimeter of the base in the middle of the damn night. I never thought I might die for a more stupid reason than I did that night. All raises were cut for the last 3 years and replaced with gifts. Flowers year 1, lunchbox year 2, and an umbrella year 3. All were of cheap quality and clearly designed for women. I'm a male nurse, or a nurse. Yay! I just left my gifts at work. At my office, we hired a mediator to come in and address some of the workplace concerns. Our communication and interaction with one particular employee was lacking. This employee had a competitive nature that borders on overbearing and uncomfortable. The mediator broke us all into pairs of 2 and asked us to arm wrestle with each other, and the winner of each match would receive a chocolate. Each group was given a bag of chocolates. Well, everyone split up and performed the task. Everyone just communicated that neither participant cared about winning and just wanted the chocolate, so everyone just split the bags. Except for the one employee we had issues with. She dominated her opponent and got every last piece of chocolate. The mediator was befuddled, gave a little speech, and left. We learned nothing. In short, mediator had our office do team-building exercises, realized we were beyond help, and left. My company really wanted to get the employees involved and excited about the new direction of the company in terms of rebranding and new marketing strategies. So they spent a lot of time trying to get people excited by the future and where we were going, and of course none of us in my office appreciated it given that they'd announced a week earlier that our office would be closed and all our work would be moved out of the country. Most people here felt like we were constantly being told how great things would be once we were gone. Insult to injury, the aggressive new marketing used the product we developed as the flagship product. When I was 20, I was the lead supervisor on a program evaluation contract, supervising 45 employees. The project was finished when I was out of the office. I worked 12 through 8 p.m. It finished around 10:30 that morning. My boss called and told me it was finished and everyone was going out to eat to celebrate. So I said, "Oh, I'll come in now, give me a few minutes." And she said, "Great, we need you to come supervise the other team, who wasn't on that project, while we go." So freaking stupid. Everything at that job was stupid, including letting a 20-year-old develop an evaluation for a statewide program on green jobs just out of the blue. I made the whole thing based on a few Wikipedia articles. Screw it. It was really successful and a lot of other states use it now, but I ultimately got fired for wanting to be paid the same amount as the other supervisor whose team didn't do as well as mine. But it was a boys' club, so I got fired. Jerks. The company held a meeting where people actually have to travel and get hotels in the home city, including the CEO. The meeting was something where the CEO was supposed to talk about the state of the company and stuff like that. Morale was generally low because they'd been cracking the whip on everyone for the last 2 years. Everyone was working 10 to 16 hours a day, sometimes on the weekends too, on a salary. So, the CEO starts talking, making his presentation, and towards the end of the hour, the hotel staff start setting up chafing dishes and setting food out. Everyone's really hungry. The Q&A period is prolonged for an extra hour because people keep asking dumb questions. So, finally it ends and everyone lines up for food. It's fettuccine alfredo or something, and it's quite disgusting after sitting in the dish becoming lukewarm after an hour. To top it all off, the CEO, in front of everyone, says, "I'm not eating that crap, it's full of carbs." He leaves everyone to go out to a, quote, real restaurant. Some of the execs stayed behind to eat with the employees because they knew what this D-bag had just done. He also did something similar during the company Christmas party several months earlier. He traveled from his home state to the state where most of the employees were, showed up for about an hour, then asked one of the young salespeople, "Where are the good clubs to go for getting decent drinks and a decent dinner?" He then took off the rest of the night, leaving us to eat the dinner served at the party. I quit quite a while ago, and he was replaced about a year later. Unfortunately, I've worked under CEOs that were much, much worse. My manufacturing company has an on-site company picnic every year with big giveaways for all employees, but you have to be physically present to win. So, night shift and anybody stuck in the factory working can't win. Just the folks whose job is unimportant enough to stop working for 5 hours and play sack races with upper management. Even when I can go, I refuse to. I make sure to wave when I drive by the picnic area when I'm driving out to a quick McDonald's lunch. It infuriates me. Thomson Reuters axed our Christmas bonuses so that we could have 4 52-inch TV screens that displayed Sky News, company stock results, company predictions, and security systems. Back when smartphones weren't super popular, my manager texted me some crap like, "Wow, any large pizza for just $10? Tell your friends to order now," blah blah, etc., corporate monster crap. Then they instructed me to pass it on to my contracts. I proceeded to use the good old fill the 10 recipient slots with the same contact and send it right back to her, and then resent about 15 times, causing her phone to be unable to do anything but receive my messages, one at a time, 150 times. She didn't send me bullcrap marketing texts to forward after that. I wonder if that still works on modern phones. Just pasting someone into the contact slot of the SMS feature of our phones that most of us barely use anymore? It was so fun getting your schoolmates into trouble doing this. The cookie incident. I was working as an IT technician for a big corporation. After September 11th, people were stressed out and our manager thinks we need a morale boost. He created some random appreciation tokens, which were nothing but tickets for theatre plays that were cancelled a week earlier, discounts for car rentals and hotel stays. Basically, just unused corporate coupons that were laying around in his office. I was bitter about not being nominated or any of my team, even if our performance numbers were better than many of the winners. We knew all of the winners were brown-nosed morons. But this time, the universe did justice. 2 days later, a regular user baked a big batch of cookies and sent them to my team. When I thanked her and asked her the reason for her kindness, she just said, "This is for all the times you guys helped me." That was way better than any random coupon. Basically these, among other things, we have bake sales even though we're all techs and there's about 3 people in the entire office who like baking. We have sports events despite the fact that very few people actually play sports. Oh, and the flash mob, so poorly executed, was intended to end up as a YouTube viral video thing. It was laughably bad. The saying, "could not organize a bender in a brewery," comes to mind. And of course, this final one, which I must stress, was not a joke. My team, for having the best performance worldwide, was given, and I crap you not, chocolate medals. I don't know if it's a US thing, but in the UK that's basically an insult. For context, sales guys got laptops and TVs right before we got our medals. What changed the view of a bigoted person to an anti-racist? Grew up with an ignorant stepdad, and although I never actually felt hate towards anyone, I'd laugh at and repeat his jokes. Until I was kicked out at 18, the only non-white people I'd ever met were a Mexican family, who were my adopted neighborhood family, and a black guy I was friends with from school. They also made the same jokes about their race and laughed along depending on the crowd. It wasn't until I got older that I realized they were all probably doing that to fit in and could have been living somewhat in fear. After being kicked out, I moved around a few times before finding a job working with developmentally disabled adults. I was hired as the white guy, the company and all the workers were all born in Africa, and moved to the US. It was a culture shock at first, but they immediately became family. They taught me how to cook, how to treat others, and their culture. They even made sure to teach me how they were treated in public by citizens and police. Since then, I haven't made or laughed at a single joke about race. I've made sure to look at everyone the same way no matter what, and I've made sure to try and help others understand how their actions may not intentionally be evil, but they can still be hurtful. I've met so many beautiful people that I wouldn't have had the chance to talk to if I'd followed that influence growing up. If anyone has any thoughts based on the color of someone else's skin and is reading this, please sit down and have a meal with someone. You'll be surprised how much you have in common while also having such different lives. I live in a pretty prejudiced country. Natives here think that we're not that racist, but sometimes it's just, wow. My family also didn't help. Comments about Black, Latino, and Romani people were constantly made, and I also got some of that racism inside of me when growing up. My depression made me change in some ways, and I guess that's one good way it changed me. I was in bed at 4 a.m. and couldn't sleep, so my brain thought it was a nice hour to think about these things for some reason, and I started asking myself, why? Why do I consider myself better than a black person or a Latino person or a Romani person? Why am I better than any of them? Why are they less than me? And also, what? What makes me good by default? And what makes them bad? What do I get from all of this? What do we get from all of this? I guess the answers were simple. Also, with therapy, I learned that making yourself feel better by making others feel worse isn't a good antidepressant, and that it is indeed a crappy move. Yeah, couldn't really have said it better myself. The people who do and say these things generally don't feel great about themselves to begin with, and most of them are really barking up the wrong tree with the way they try to make themselves feel better. Not me, but my best friend's parents. They told her not to touch me because she'd get my, quote, skin disease. I'm a brownie, and at the time we met, I was 12. They didn't want us to be friends, but I'd always be kind and polite to them, knowing full well how they felt about my skin color. One year, my friend, at this point best friend, was having a sleepover party, and her parents said I could come, but I couldn't sleep over. My friend then cancelled her party, and her parents must have felt like complete crap because they started to talk to me more and more after that. We've been best friends for almost 30 years now. Her parents came to my wedding, and they send me a Christmas card every year. They call me and ask me how I'm doing, and they invite me to their get-togethers. I'm glad they came around, and I'm proud of them. My dad would make disparaging remarks about black people, Mexicans, Chinese people, basically everyone else when I was a kid. I remember repeating these same sentiments, and nobody ever corrected me. In first grade, we were all assigned pen pals from a school in another city, and mine was a black girl named Chardonnay. I thought she had a weird name, and I was disappointed when I found out she wasn't white. Very soon after that, we learned some very basic info about the civil rights movement during Black History Month. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, separate water fountains, segregated schools, stuff like that. After that, I felt really bad about being racist and wanting a different pen pal, and really ashamed of my dad and grandparents for thinking that way. And I was so mad that they'd taught me to think their way. After that, I was really happy to have the opportunity to write to my pen pal and get to know her better. I'm so thankful that my school started teaching us about racism early on. It's scary to think about how it could have ended up if those sentiments had gone unchecked. My grandma grew up in Virginia in the 1900s. Being racist is just the default setting. Nana loved her family more than anything, though. So at one point in the late 1980s, she met her first not 100% white grandkid and discovered she still loved him. She made astounding late-life progress accepting that darker skin-toned people were not only people, but family, friends, and welcome in her house. I grew up in a white bubble. White neighborhood, white schools, white friends. I wasn't hate-filled or anything towards other races, just a bit nervous due to zero experience. I heard a lot of racial epithets, but I didn't say them myself. Going to college, I met many people of many different races and found most of them were just good people. I discovered that the same 10% jerk to 90% good people ratio I found among white people at my high school translated to college as well. The jerks were not grouped in a particular minority, but pretty universally scattered. My mom was surprised when I brought home a girlfriend from college who wasn't white. Mom asked why I didn't tell her in advance, but I didn't think that was important. I married that girl a few years later. I got over my prejudices when I moved away from my one-horse hometown and got away from my extremely prejudiced family. I didn't even live in a one-horse town. My hometown had one of the fastest-growing zip codes in the country at one point before I left for college. However, the religious environment I grew up in was just very racist and of course quite homophobic. I feel like those always go hand in hand, right? My father told me that the Bible says you shouldn't date outside your race, and that I would never date or marry a black or Hispanic man because he didn't want his bloodline mixing with theirs. Don't worry though, these apparently weren't his thoughts. He talked to God and God told him this. Joke's on him. After dating a bunch of loser guys who just so happened to be white, I was set up on a blind date with a man who happened to be Hispanic. That was 5 years, 5 pets, and a house purchase ago, and we're getting engaged any day now. I had to go through a journey to become a decent person before that, but it started pretty much immediately after I went to college and started making friends that I didn't have to have approved by my parents. Turns out, all the people my parents hate are actually really freaking nice and supportive people once you treat them as humans. Meanwhile, all of the respect and courtesy in the world won't make my parents any less themselves. Man, I don't even know where to start with this one. I grew up in the middle of frickin' nowhere, Mississippi, where the slave trade was referred to as the Great African Migration in our history books. Every person of color was referred to by the N-word as just the default. It wasn't until I moved the frick out of the South that I began to comprehend what racism was. I wish I could say I had a moment of clarity that washed away all the bullcrap that I'd grown up with, but it was more like a couple of decades worth of mental deprogramming that I had to fight against. There was so much underlying hate of different people that warped how my view of the world was. Oh boy. Well, I'm sure the current administration will do their utmost best to bring the term Great African Migration back as the cultural norm given the way they're going. I'd apologize for being political, but February and March of 2025 have really been something, let me tell ya. I didn't realize the incredibly bigoted environment I was being raised in until 4th grade. I was in a group project having to give a presentation to the class. My group was me and 2 black girls. My parents hated black women, black people in general, but especially black women. As they both watched tennis, you can guess all the crap they said about the Williams sisters. Meanwhile, there I was, standing there watching my group mates talk. They were just as good, if not better than me at talking in class, or understanding the materials, or anything really. I can still see that moment where the class fades away in my mind, and one of my group mates is talking to the class where I realized a fundamental truth. My parents were wrong. It still makes me sad thinking about stuff I remember saying as a kid, regurgitating things I heard my parents or relatives say, but in my experience, as I've gotten older, is that the number way to combat racism is to bring people into the same room. When people have shared experiences, that sense of otherness fades away. Of course, in 2021, and the internet being what it is, it's really easy for people to hide in their own corners of the internet. But I'm thankful for that experience in 4th grade. I got in trouble a lot over the years for getting mad when my family would throw around the N-word or lock their doors when they saw black people. But I knew I was right, and in the decades that have passed, nothing has tarnished or taken away that childhood lesson. Not me, but my grandpa. He told me that when he was young, he had real prejudices due to his jerk alcoholic dad also being the same way and teaching him to treat others of different races like trash. He told me this stopped when he was around 13 when his dad left. He realized how stupid it was to judge others based on the color of their skin, and I'm glad he realized how bad it was since he's a really sweet guy now. When I was wounded in Iraq, 2 white guys stepped over me, one literally stepped on my back, to get themselves to a safer place. A black guy picked me up like I was a child, carried me to safety, and held my hand until a medic got there. This is the perfect time for this quote by former President Lyndon B. Johnson. If you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice that you're picking his pockets. You see, we're all the same, humans, but some people, regardless of color, will take advantage of you if they can, and there are those that will help you regardless of the color of your skin. Not all skin folk are kinfolk, and not all kinfolk are good folk. Learning about people by talking to them instead of listening to what my family had to say about them. I joined the military, left home, and experienced cultures around the world. I wouldn't say I was ever racist and thought that I was better than anyone, but I was severely lacking in cultural awareness due to growing up in a small town surrounded by openly bigoted people. Luckily, my children were able to grow up in a completely different environment than the one I did. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My dad was a bigot. I was raised in a toxic environment and I guess some of his ideologies rubbed off on me. He was also violent when alcohol was involved, which was a lot of the time. Police would often arrest him just to get him in a cell for the night for being disorderly. On one occasion, the police turned up. One of them came into my room and sat with me as they dealt with my dad. He asked how I was, who I could talk to. The cop was from a South Asian background. He was very kind to me and did his best in calming me down and giving me advice on dealing with this stuff. I was only about 15 at the time. As they were pulling my dad out, the same officer was attacked by my dad, who broke free from the other officer, breaking the officer's finger in the process, whilst also hurling verbal and racial slurs at him. It wasn't long after the London bombings, so you can imagine what was said. My dad was also an electrician in Russell Square at the time, close to one of the blasts. The officer didn't react, probably knowing I was watching the commotion from my room, or the fact that he was just a decent person. My dad was convicted of multiple offenses against a police officer as well as a hate crime. The only silver lining was that as my dad was being sentenced, the prosecutor was a black man who casually read out the testimony of the arresting officer of what my dad said that night. The prosecutor could barely keep a straight face, watching my dad hold his head in shame, dressed in plastic overalls because he thought stuffing his clothes down the toilet of his jail cell and flooding the place would be funny. He got community service, probation, and was required to attend rehab. He relapsed a few years ago and can barely walk or talk because of multiple strokes from continued alcohol dependency. The people responsible for protecting me from my dad were people of color. That sure as hell changes your perspective on things, even if you have the slightest ignorance towards another race. In short, Dad was a violent bigot dressed in prison overalls, sentenced by educated black guy in a suit. Well, sounds like it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Don't be like the dad in this story, folks. From birth, I was raised, according to my parents' views, in a pretty backwards household. I'm from Virginia. I was ignorant, I used the N-word, anti-Semitic, homophobic, and racist language every day. My immediate family and extended family all shared the same ignorance. At family gatherings, if one of my oldest cousins let slip they were dating someone new, the first question would literally be, "Is he or she white?" Followed by laughter, but the question was serious. Then I started middle school, 6th grade. On the first day of class, I set down my backpack against the classroom wall, like every other student, while we found our desks, and had a small meet and greet with new classrooms. I made sure to only speak to the white kids whom I knew from elementary school. Our teacher then told us to take our seats. I'm 42 years old and I remember it like it was yesterday. I picked up my backpacks, found my desk, and before I could open my bag, the girl behind me told me she liked my earrings. Her mum wouldn't let her get her ears pierced until high school. Then I heard another voice from further behind me say, "Miss K, this isn't my backpack." The backpack sitting on the girl's desk was identical to the one sitting on my desk. We both opened our backpacks and realized we'd grabbed the wrong ones. Internally, I rolled my eyes in disgust. This girl was an N, but I was taught to never let it show. So we met each other quickly to exchange. Her smile was beautiful. She wore glasses the same shape as mine. She wore her hair in a ponytail, just like mine. In our back-to-school shopping, we picked the exact same backpack and we picked the exact same Nikes, pink and white. Her name was Jacinda. I found myself genuinely smiling back at her and giggling like young girls do. That day she asked to sit together during lunch, and we sat beside each other for lunch every single day of middle school. She was my very first best friend. Jacinda taught me about her Sunday school classes, my family never attended church, and we talked about everything important in the life of middle school girls. She wasn't allowed to attend my birthday parties, and I wasn't allowed to go to hers, but we always celebrated together at school. I loved her so much. When it was time to go to high school, I continued in public school, and her parents chose to homeschool her. I thought homeschooling was the coolest idea. Jacinda was and is brilliantly intelligent. God, she was going to do great things for this world. Long before the age of social media, we lost touch sadly, but I still think of her often. After meeting Jacinda, I never used another racist or derogatory word. Meeting Jacinda changed my life for the better. Real talk, some of these answers make me extremely uncomfortable. It's mainly white people realizing minorities, especially black people, are humans too. It is positive, but it just makes me realize there's a lot of racists out there who view minorities as subhuman because of their stupid upbringings and ignorant ways of thinking. Moving out of a predominantly white neighborhood and meeting people of different races and backgrounds, realizing they're just people like you trying to live their lives. That'll do it. My situation was complicated growing up. My father was the son of an Italian immigrant with Egyptian roots, and he was so ungodly awful towards anyone not considered white as he considered himself white. The thing is, my dad has dark brown skin, dark brown eyes, and black kinked curly hair. He looked exactly like the people he criticized the hardest. He hated Arabs, all Arabs, and he is part Arab. This was so confusing. He also hated gay people, Muslims, the commies, whoever they happened to be, and any type of alternative lifestyles. He hated black people the most, though. He told me if I ever brought home a black boyfriend, he'd disown me. He told me as a small child that if I misbehaved, I'd be sent to live with an N-word family in the ghetto. He was equally misogynistic and held on to a strong patriarchal mindset. I admit, as a kid, I repeated his words. All the other kids did too in my neighborhood, so I thought he was right. It wasn't until I was literally in my 30s that I realized the internalized racism I still held on to. All my partners and friends were white my entire life. I felt unsafe near a group of black men. It was only when I moved to Northern Europe that I realized I'm not considered white here, and I experienced racism myself, and whoo, let me tell you what an eye-opener that was. I began to dismantle my entire thought process, and honestly, I'm so repulsed by my father now I can't even speak to him without feeling disgusted. He's really old now and much more calm, and probably won't live more than 10 years. I haven't returned to my birth country to see him in almost 7 years because I'm so angry at him. Because of his bigotry, I missed out on friendships, relationships, and understanding cultures different from my own. I'm making up for lost time now, as the immigrant community that I live in is amazing and supportive, but I'll never get back that lost time, and I'll never know fully the extent of damage that my hateful words might have done to people who didn't deserve it. Yeah, it's tragic how many otherwise good people likely get set off on a bad course with regards to how to treat other human beings for decades after they leave home. So many missed opportunities and connections turned aside because your folks were full of hate that they themselves had passed on to them. I know this isn't the exact question, but I was raised in a strict military Republican household. Although race wasn't the biggest issue there, they were extremely homophobic and believed women belonged in the home and in their place. They'd make fun of lesbians and gay men throughout my whole life and speak poorly of women working outside the home. When I was 18, I met a guy at my local coffee shop in a very red town and state. I couldn't have decided if I wanted to date him or take him shopping and hang out. He was just super cool. We made plans and later ate hot wings and drank wine. I'd never felt more myself than when I was with him. I had to forget any financial adult backing in college because my new lifestyle didn't meet my family's ideals. This was absolutely okay with me, and I charged through the challenge happily whilst accumulating debt. Turns out, this guy had run away from his home and was cut off from his family for being gay. He became my roommate for more than 9 years and my best friend in the world. And by roommate, I mean I always had a place for him to stay in my own home, and he always seemed to move right in the most natural way possible. Literally, he was just always there in my home through every stage of life for a decade. He introduced me to the gay community, and as a female, instead of getting felt up at a club, I could go out dancing with him and have a blast and be safe all night. He became my family and closest confidant over the years. My family didn't take kindly to this friendship, nor did they like that I became a business owner. They no longer speak to me, and I'm so happy to be the black sheep of that family. Anyway, I'm so glad I met him. He changed my life. I would have been comfortable in my conservative bubble and probably never questioned my views. His friendship made me open my eyes to not only the world of possibilities, but also my own views of what I was being raised with. He challenged me and made me a better person, and I'll always be grateful for the absolute gift he gave to me. Because I was now a safe person with views different than what my small town was used to. I became a safe friend for people to come to, and my God, it's been the honor of my life to grow, find acceptance, and apply acceptance blindly. I don't have personal experience in this, but I wanted to bring up Daryl Davis in this thread. He was a black musician and writer that has gotten roughly 200 people to leave the Klan or other white organizations. He's worth reading about. I left the church and my conservative family. Started examining myself closely. The real tricky thing about being raised with these views is that you never think to question it at the time. In the moment, you feel like you're just quoting statistics or calling it how it is, all the usual crap terms. It takes a lot of work to actually stop, look at yourself, and then dig out that ugly, bigoted worm from your heart. My great aunt and I had a conversation before she passed away. She lived her whole life in New Zealand and admitted to me that she was racist against the indigenous people of New Zealand. Way back in the day, her and her husband bought a house on what they didn't realize was Maori sacred land. They were the first people on the street, but it was eventually filled up. Over the years, they had a lot of run-ins with the elders and even protesters. This tension only worsened her idea of Maori people. Her and I are both kind of spiritual and religious, and had already talked about our respective beliefs a little bit. She said that one day the Holy Spirit told her to learn the Maori language. She said she resisted the thought for a long time, but eventually decided to. Learning te reo connected her with Maori culture, and more importantly, directly with Maori people. She learned to love their culture, and continued to go to lessons for the remainder of her life. She also demolished their house and built a new one down the road. So, if you're ever in New Zealand and find a street where the house numbered 1 is planted firmly between 3 and 4, you've found the house of my family. Too stubborn to change their house number, but willing enough to knock over their old one for people they didn't know. You know, I wouldn't have classified myself as one of these people, but I definitely had some racist ideas about natives in my city growing up. There's a lot of native addicts and vagrants, but it's very much as a result of a system that's rigged against those communities. I didn't know any of that growing up, so when I saw a group of drunk native people in the park or something, I was generally unimpressed or even frightened, and I definitely applied those feelings to all the natives I came across from then on in. It's hard to change those reactions, but we can all identify the bad reactions and try to curb them. What looks easy peasy lemon squeezy, but is actually difficult lemon difficult. Work. I'm a lawyer and had a client call saying she needs a hand with a merger, but don't worry, it's super easy peasy lemon squeezy. That project took 6 months and I almost had a breakdown. She didn't understand why the bill was so high since it was so easy. Playing the triangle. A lot of my non-musician friends joke about how easy it is to play it. Then they actually hold the damn thing and they look real dumb. You guys laugh about the triangle players, but you have no idea how hard it is to stay focused while counting 1, 3, 2 bars and not miss your cue. Whistling with your fingers. Dancing. I wouldn't say it looks easy, but when I see other people do it, they're so good at it and it flows so well, it just looks easier than it is. But damn, I just cannot get my body to do anything more than a bop and maybe some stupid arm moves. I'm 25 and I dance like a 50-year-old at a reunion. Dances are so delicate and make it look so easy, it's honestly amazing. It's just hilarious when I try to do literally anything and fail horribly. Drawing something from memory, like a bird or something. In my mind, yep, that's a bird. On paper, that's a bird? Those capture things on Google. I can honestly never read them, and the website always thinks I'm a robot. I swear when I have to select photos with street signs and one overlaps just barely into another square, I consistently fail them. A basic physical exam at the doctor. Looks like a simple look at the throat, listen to the chest thing. Yep, they have a heart all right. When in actuality, doctors spend thousands of hours practicing it so that when you come in with a murmur or a funny-looking kid syndrome, they can recognize it immediately. And yes, there are entire class sections on how to respectfully ask your patients to turn their head and cough as you push on their downstairs. They're looking for hernias. Digging. Anytime it's shown in movies or TV, it looks easy. But the second you have to grab a shovel and break dirt, blech. Oh, television. Here, just let me dig a 6-foot grave with a shovel. 20 minutes later, welp, all done. That is not how it works, Walking Dead. The narrator has just been playing the start of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is a remarkable medieval life simulator, apart from the fact that your character can somehow dig a grave in a few minutes whilst sick the day after taking an arrow in the back. I'm a relatively fit person, and I think I'd struggle to do it in a day if the soil was anything less than perfectly soft sod. Natural-looking makeup. It's far more work than regular makeup. When people say easy as pie, pie is the most difficult thing I've ever done or made or calculated. Street names. Everyone thinks it's great fun and likes to offer suggestions, but every tree, lake, and other natural feature has at least a dozen variations which you can't repeat for emergency service reasons. That, and you get cities which want a street name change anytime the road changes direction, regardless of a logical breakpoint like an intersection. Pretty much anything that a professional does. They make it look easy because it's their job. Throw a football 65 yards accurately? Poof! Simple if you're an elite athlete. Cut open a chest cavity to fix a few coronary arteries? That's just another day at the office for a surgeon. Frame up a structural wall within a 2,000 square foot house? Just a bunch of wood and nails is all you need. Make crowded teeth perfectly aligned? Surely it's just a matter of wearing trays 1 through 55. Voila! It's all straight. In reality, each of these tasks takes someone who's trained for years to visualize the problem, solve it, and execute it to the T. It looks easy because they've practiced the heck out of it. Making lemonade. Sure, squeezing one lemon is easy peasy, but do you know how much juice that makes? Not a whole lot. Flying remote-controlled helicopters. It looks so effortless when watching seasoned flyers, but in reality it's like balancing a marble on an upturned bowl. I'll never forget the time I went out and bought a decently priced helicopter. 5 minutes into setting it up, I didn't even get it 3 feet off the floor before it smashed into the deck chair I was sitting on, destroying the rotor blades. I tried maybe like 5 to 6 more times before I gave up, and now it hangs in my garage as a monument to my failure. Hanging out with your friends during that I'm not at school but I'm still dependent on my family period, where you have spare time in droves but no way of getting anywhere. Writing a 250-word open-ended reflection where you're expected to be creative. All I want as a grad student is some goddamn structure and also a rubric. Actually doing things. In theory, it's simple, you just do the thing. In reality, I procrastinate until I hate myself. Self-discipline is the single hardest skill to master in this world that makes it so easy to just not. Maintaining friendships from high school and college after you graduate. People get so busy with work and starting their own families that friendships get put on the back burner. You stop talking to someone for a few months and then suddenly it hits you that you're no longer friends with that person. You should reach back out though. Everyone understands, and I've rekindled and kept in touch intermittently with so many amazing people. Yes, we're not the best at talking every day, but if crap went down I could give them a call and vice versa, and when we do get together it's a great time. I use a wheelchair, and people usually don't believe me when I say that getting around can be difficult, because many of them think that pushing a wheelchair is easy. They literally tell me this. The thing is, when you use a wheelchair all day and it's basically your only means of transportation, it looks more natural. This becomes a problem when I point out accessibility problems. They often don't believe me because they see how I can navigate and just assume that it's easy. That's because I make it look easy. Finding the person I always saw myself falling in love with. Folding fitted sheets. I've watched instructional videos that make it look so easy, but I always just end up with a crumpled mess, and that's how it gets put away. Finding a career that you'll want to go to every day that won't crush your soul. Remember when you were young and teachers told you that you could be whatever you wanted to be? Yeah, not so realistic when you want to pay your bills and maybe have a little beer money as well. I didn't go to college, and I struggle with the thought of not being able to have a lateral career move without a degree, but then I see my friends absolutely floundering with their student loan payments, and I think that maybe I don't have it so bad after all. I went to college, grad school, got a PhD, and I work in a senior role at a highly coveted company. I still don't feel happy. The one thing I've learned after all these years is that happiness isn't defined by your title or company affiliation or number of letters after your name. My resume won't be on my tombstone. But in many ways, I'm stuck because of the responsibilities I have now and all the people in my family and my profession I'm accountable to. I feel like I'll always be in pursuit of happiness rather than enjoying the moment I'm living in. Beekeeping. You see those videos of the old dudes in their veils and beekeeping suits, and it makes it seem so relaxing and easy. Turns out that bees aren't so good at finding enough food on their own, and they can get really sick real easy, and in the winter they can mold. Have you ever seen moldy bees? Sometimes they're not even dead. It's still worth it though. It's kind of a pipe dream of the narrator's to one day have a cottage with a bit of land that he can live out his Stardew Valley life aspirations on, including beekeeping. This makes me a little bit scared about it. Poor little cordyceps bees. Socializing with people. I have severe social anxiety, and even small interactions with strangers and some people I've known for a while are really hard for me. I don't hate people or dislike being around them, but I'm just awful at keeping conversations going or initiating them. Outgoing people make it look very easy. For me, it's not. Losing weight. Changing habits is hard. Screw you, duvet covers. Screw you hard. Writing a post or comment on the internet that actually gets recognition. Being in your 20s. As a clueless kid, I thought by now I'd have everything figured out and my life on track. I'm still clueless now, but I also have depression. I'm in my 30s, still clueless. Committing self-deletion. It looks easy, but when the time comes, it can be very hard to commit to it. Then you spiral further down the rabbit hole thinking you're so crap you can't even off yourself. True story. Being an adult. I thought they never had to do homework, could stay up late, eat what they wanted, and had the money. I wish I was a naive kid again. Getting away with murder. Well, actually, if you go to a large city and off someone you have no connection to, the odds are you'll get away scot-free. For example, the homicide arrest rate in Baltimore and Chicago are about 20%, meaning you have an 80% chance of not getting arrested. Nationwide, the catch rate for murders is only about 50-50. It's way easier if you kill someone you're not close to. Losing my virginity. Golf. I feel like most people think they can just grip it and rip it and don't take into account how hard it is to have a consistently good swing with solid contact. I missed the first word as I was skimming through this and I thought you were talking about tickling your pickle. Math. I swear to God, pieces of my soul became trapped in math work and perished when I burned them. When I was younger, I did terribly at algebra and geometry. I failed one and went to summer school for the other. I couldn't grasp any of it, and if I did decently on a test, it was because I was looking at other people's answers. Calculus was so out of the question that it would have been ridiculous to bring up as an option for a class to take. Here I am today at my full-time job doing basic math that I learned from grades 3 to 5, and I kill it. Don't let the difficult math get the best of you, folks. Killing Enderman for Ender Pearls. Playing an instrument. I've played most percussion instruments, trumpet, some baritone, and I was first chair tuba and sousaphone for 4 years, and difficulty varies based on instrument and physical attributes. I was going to say the same thing. I played drums on a long-term hiatus. Not sure I'll go back to playing though. People seem to either think that playing the drums is borderline impossible. Well, it's honestly not that difficult to play really simple stuff, although it is difficult to play the really simple stuff well. But even people who are halfway decent on the instrument will tell you it's incredibly difficult to get good, much less great. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Selling your underwear online. I've seen a couple of posts about how someone could exploit desperate dudes on Craigslist by buying women's underwear, spritzing them with perfume, and then selling them. Were it so easy, folks? Nowadays, buyers want to see photos of the real woman in the exact pair they'll be buying, or proof in the form of being Panty Trust certified. They'll want extras or special requests for their order. Plenty of them have other bedroom interests to go around, and the vast majority of them will drop off the face of the earth when it comes time to actually pay. You'll have to sift through hundreds of responses to your ad, knowing most of them will be time wasters just trying to get a little dirty talk or some photos. My advice? Don't bother. Leave it to the cam girls who make some side cash off selling their undies, because there's always going to be someone willing to go a step further than you, and they'll be the one to make the sale. Programming. It's like Lego sets. Anyone can follow the instructions and make the Millennium Falcon, but it's a whole different ballgame when you're given a pile of assorted blocks and someone says, "Okay, now recreate the Taj Mahal." But the client also wants it to look like Big Ben, and it needs to be able to interlock with the Sphinx, the Great Wall, the Eiffel Tower, and the Maojang Temple to create a super monument. Yes, I know the Maojang Temple hasn't been designed yet, just make some good guesses. We can add parts to it once we know what we need. Rainbow Road on Mario Kart. I still don't think I've ever come first. Marriage. I think many people believe that they'll be romantically in love with the person they're marrying. In many ways you are, but most with long, successful marriages will tell you it takes work to make a marriage last a lifetime. That level of commitment is hard to maintain. The rewards are enormous and you'll never be closer to another human if you're doing it right. My wife and I just celebrated our 40th and we've known each other for more than 45 years, planning on being together till the end. Atari video games. I mean, they look basic, but for crying out loud. Just finding one of those crappy, underpaid, underrespected jobs that people can't wait to leave. I hear that. Either they aren't hiring you when you're young because you can't write a CV to save your life and nobody wants to employ a lanky, weird teenage boy, or you've worked better jobs since then and now you're overqualified. Winning. Writing a long story. I'm about to finish wrapping up my first ever seriously long-form piece of writing. It's going to be about 160,000 words all told. You might think to yourself, that's not too long. I can read a book that length in an afternoon. Or, I can knock that out in a month or two, just writing a couple of thousand words a day. Or, you just tell a story and it all leaps out fully formed. And you would be wrong. Writing, as enjoyable as it can be for the author and audience, is a lot of work you just don't see. Yeah, you see the finished product, but what you don't see are things like drafts, discarded scenes, variant writings, conversations with editors, free writing exercises, and just the sheer number of ideas that you come up with that don't make it to the final product. I'd estimate I've easily spent more than 1 million words behind the scenes making this project happen. It sounds easy. You have a plot and you make it happen, starting at page 1, and do through to the back cover. A lot of my writing is somewhat out of order. Starting from page 1 is honestly a snooze fest and a chore. I don't want to read the part of the fantasy story that's farm boy baling hay, and nobody really likes that part either unless they're a medievalist and the book goes full Tolkien about how that works. I've probably deleted 75% of all the words I've ever spawned for the product. Beyond spewing words, there's tone to mind, characters to track, continuity, foreshadowing, building, managing tension, avoiding forcing cliches or stupidity, making imagery, dialogue that's not only nice to read, but also that you can imagine being spoken. And this all has to be managed under a word count that's enough for your reader to get the point without boring them or wearing your fingers down to nubs. You want to know how long it's taken me to write this thing? 2 frickin' years. I've loved it, but hot damn, it's way harder than it looks when you just see the finished piece and can think that I just sat down one day and made it all come to life without complication. Writing a novel-length piece of fiction is tough. I plan to do more, but I no longer have the idea I'll just be able to pump out a piece every couple of months like clockwork at a couple of thousand words a day. Coding. When you're watching the tutorial, you're thinking, oh, this is easy. When you're writing it, you're thinking, where is the fricking missing semicolon? Where? Making an actual quality meme. Inside jokes are normally easy, and memes for content-specific subs are really easy. But if you're making original content for a wider audience, like Reddit memes for example, feels almost impossible to make stuff that'll be widely liked. Diapering a baby, feeding a baby, getting a baby to sleep, it all looks easy until you have 12 babies in your classroom that all need to be diapered, fed, and rocked to sleep in the next 15 minutes. Doing literally anything when you have depression. Being a server. I've worked in many different front-of-house positions in restaurants and bars, including GMing and running cocktail programs. Holy crap, without the bar to protect you from the herd, you're just hanging in the open, trying to get a rhythm that will cover the most ground and give the most service. I've never made it a serving shift without forgetting to enter in an important part of an order. Bartending is all about managing interactions and throughput. Serving is about getting treated like your name is Boy and trying to balance the needs of your customers with the amount of them and the throughput of the kitchen that you do not have the up-to-the-minute information on. Online dating. As a girl, I have a wide range of prospects, but it's a lot of work to find someone I actually want to meet, and I'll generally have some good first dates when I do, but then the guy goes MIA. Retail work. Any customer service-based job sucks, but I think retail tops it. Most McDonald's at least have a good amount of staff for rush hour, in my experience at least, whereas in retail you still regularly go through the busiest times with nowhere near enough people. You also have to put up with BS all the time. The lorry turns up 4 hours early with the delivery. The tills crash during busy time. You waste 10 minutes explaining to someone why the deal on last week is not on this week, the weekly deal, the usual stuff. What do you mean you want me to keep the tags on? So you want all of the alarms in the shops to go off, and you have to damage the product yourself to get it off? I'm telling you, the button isn't working. Here, let me show you, clearly pressing the button marked specific coupon and it's not working. It's not my fault, I'm a history student, not a till engineer. No, there is no override. I cannot scan your points card and give you points after you've paid. There is now nothing on the system and it says, next customer please. The customer isn't always right and people that say that should go work Christmas in retail. Then try saying it. Okay, my rant's over, but there is plenty more back there in my head. Looking presentable every day. Any competitive video game. A lot of people think it's really easy to make money from esports. I've heard people say many times, they're just playing video games, they shouldn't be making so much money. Well, then try it. Science. There's a huge difference between being a scientist and being a fan of science. Both are important, but they aren't the same. A lot of people take a science class or start following a science-based Facebook or Twitter or subreddit and only see the successes. Science is a critical, thought-heavy endeavor that requires equal parts patience, smarts, and luck. As a researcher doing basic science, you're going to have upwards of 90% negative data. For every scientific publication you see, there are months or even years of negative data behind it. The stuff that science fans and cheerleaders share on Facebook from pages like I effing love science is distilled from the frustrations and efforts of scientists that probably drink heavily. Yeah, and although the narrator is a big fan of certain scientific simplifications, like those presented on IFLS for those of us who can't do the math ourselves, it should be pointed out that they're prime for manipulation by bad actors. Seriously, if one of them found out that they could get more engagement by posting a certain type of climate change disapproval or Joe Rogan-esque pseudosciencism, they're one bad-acting head editor away from misleading tons of people. The water level from the NES Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. Giving a woman a screaming good time orally. An ollie on a skateboard. Keeping it calm. Screw you, meme. At the very sight of keep it calm, I remember everything that's wrong with this world. Life after university graduation. People always say that they can't wait to graduate, but little did they know it's just going to be an uphill battle from there. Creating a routine is the easy part. Actually following through and maintaining that routine is the problem. Telling the people closest to you that you're not okay and that you need help. You think about it, and you play it out in your head, and then your stupid brain takes the worst possible response or outcome that could happen if you reached out, and puts it front and center on repeat. Any legitimate reaction or discussion is then hidden behind the thought of being ridiculed for weakness, mockingly pointing out your flaws, minimizing the situation, so you hide it. You fake it and you just cruise through the day on autopilot until a week or two passes by and you consider it again. You repeat the cycle, continually beating yourself up in your own head. If you're strong enough, you deal with it for years, decades even. And if you're not, it starts to manifest into the real world and starts to affect how you behave and how you interact with the world and others. Maybe you start to isolate yourself, fearing that the next conversation you have, you might slip and say something that will let the cat out of the bag. You may even become hostile or domineering to people because that level of interaction is the easiest kind to get, or maybe it's just fun. Or in the worst case, you turn to different substances just to make it go away for a little bit. You go through these motions over and over and over and over again, but you just end up back at the beginning. Thinking about how all the friends you went to school with are now married with kids and are buying their first homes, or are now really finding their rhythm with their careers and are starting to climb the ladders in their respective fields. Maybe both. While you sit here, alone, on Reddit, putting thoughts that you've had for months into texts, kind of hoping that it gets buried. All because you couldn't find a way to say, I don't know what I'm doing and I need help. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.